Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Vincent Brothers. Vincent Brothers was born on May 30th, 1962, in Long Island, New York. From a young age, he was known for his charisma, reliability, and diligence. He also served in the Marine Corps Reserves. After graduating from Norfolk State University, Vincent moved to California in the mid-1980s to pursue further education and eventually earned a master's degree. Despite having a successful career as a school administrator, Vincent's personal life was marred by tumultuous relationships. His two previous marriages ended in divorce. In 1988, while working at California State University in Bakersfield, Vincent had a daughter with his girlfriend. He took his girlfriend to court to establish paternity and was eventually awarded custody and visitation rights. Initially required to pay $350 per month in child support, this amount was increased to $771 in 2003. That same year, Vincent was convicted of wife abuse and received a 6-day jail sentence and probation. In 1992, Vincent married for the second time, but this marriage also ended in divorce in 1996 due to accusations of intimidation and physical abuse by his second wife. While serving as the assistant principal at Emerson High School, Vincent was accused of sexually harassing a colleague. The woman claimed that Vincent assaulted her at his home and took her phone to prevent her from calling the police. When she tried to report the incident to the police, she said police discouraged her from pursuing charges because she was afraid of Vincent's reputation. The harassment continued at school, with Vincent allegedly touching her inappropriately. The woman eventually resigned from her job as a teacher, citing an unfriendly work environment. The school district investigated Vincent due to his increasingly threatening behavior and threatening phone calls. Despite Vincent denying the allegations and having no disciplinary record, the school district transferred him to another school as a precaution. Vincent then began working at John C. Fremont Elementary School in Bakersfield, California, where he also became famous and respected. Vincent was especially known for ensuring the safety of students by taking them home after school. While teaching at Fremont Elementary School, Vincent met Joni Harper, the school's security supervisor and basketball manager. Vincent and Joni began dating and eventually married after the birth of their first child, Marcus. Their family grew with the arrival of their second child, Lindsay, in 2000. However, Vincent's infidelity caused him and Joni to divorce in September 2001. 2 years later, Vincent and Joni remarried in secret, and their third child, Marshall, was born 4 months later. Joni eventually opened up to her friends about the problems in her marriage. Unlike before, she expressed her fear that Vincent might harm her. However, to those around them, Vincent's family appeared happy and actively involved in the community, often attending local events and maintaining good relationships with others. From the outside, Joni and Vincent's marriage seemed stable. Joni continued to work as a basketball manager, pursuing her passion. However, no one expected that the tragic events hidden behind the family's happy exterior would soon emerge. 3 months before the tragic event, Vincent had moved out of the house due to frequent arguments with his mother-in-law, Ernestine. On July 6, 2003, Joni attended a church service with her 3 children, Marcus, Lindsay, and 6-week-old Marshall, as well as her mother, Ernestine. The family had lunch at Black Angus after the ceremony, then returned home for a nap. As was their custom, Joni and the children stayed in one bedroom, while Ernestine stayed in another room in the house. Tragically, the family was attacked in their home. The killer easily entered the house without signs of forced entry and shot Joni twice in the head while she was in the bedroom. Lindsay was also shot in the back. The noise alerted Ernestine, causing her to quickly arm herself with a .38 revolver and move toward the hallway to investigate. Unfortunately, she was killed before she could defend herself. The attacker shot Ernestine twice in the face, causing her to collapse in the hallway outside her bedroom. The attacker then entered the room and shot Marcus, followed by a fatal shot to the baby's back. Each shot was aimed very carefully. Instead of fleeing the scene immediately, the attacker went to the kitchen to get a knife and then returned to the bedroom. There, the attacker stabbed the victims multiple times in the back. On July 8, 2003, Kelsey Spann, Joni's best friend, became worried when she had not heard from Joni, Ernestine, and Joni's children since they went to church the previous Sunday. Kelsey decided to go to Joni's house to check on them using the key Joni had given her. When she tried to unlock the door, she found it difficult to open due to an obstacle. She then went to the back of the house and found an unlocked sliding glass door, which was unusual. Upon entering the house, Kelsey discovered Joni, her mother Ernestine, and Marcus, Lindsay, and Marshall, all dead. Kelsey immediately contacted authorities at 7 a.m. They arrived at the scene and discovered 5 family members brutally murdered. The family's peaceful home, located in a quiet neighborhood, became the scene of a horrific crime. The police investigation concluded that the family had been tragically killed on Sunday afternoon as they returned from church. Before leaving the scene, the perpetrator covered the bodies in the bedroom with blankets and pillows taken from other rooms. Detectives identified Joni as the primary target due to the severity of her injuries, suggesting the attacker had been extremely angry. Police were concerned about Vincent's safety and discovered he had been in Ohio. Detective Watts traveled to North Carolina, where Vincent was visiting his mother with his brother Melvin. When North Carolina police met with Vincent, they found him severely traumatized and unable to speak coherently, which did not provide many details about the investigation. Vincent's behavior was inconsistent with that of a murderer, and because he had been on the other side of the country when the murder occurred, police initially ruled him out as a suspect. He also provided receipts showing purchases made around the time of the tragedy, confirming that he had not been in Bakersfield, California, where the incident occurred. However, Detective Watts still doubted Vincent's innocence. Notably, Vincent never asked how his wife and children had died, which aroused suspicion. On July 11, 2003, Vincent had returned to Los Angeles without attending their family's memorial service, but Vincent had attended their funeral 5 days later. As the investigation continued, it was discovered that Vincent had moved out of his family home in April 2003. Additionally, his wife, Joni, had been planning to divorce him again and had sought child support. Authorities also discovered that Vincent had had a history of violence against women, which had led them to take a closer look at his alibi. Upon further investigation, surveillance video from the store's checkout counters had shown that Melvin, not Vincent, had made the purchase at that time. When confronted, Melvin revealed that Vincent had told him to make these purchases in Vincent's name. Despite their efforts, police were unable to find any witnesses who had seen Vincent between the evening of July 4th and the evening of July 7th. Both Melvin and his family insisted they had not seen Vincent during this time. Although there was no direct evidence linking Vincent to the murder, police discovered he had some suspicious activities. Vincent had rented a car when he had arrived in Columbus, Ohio, and he had stayed at his brother's house. Police suspected Vincent had flown to Columbus on July 2, 2003 to visit family, then returned to Bakersfield on July 4, where the tragic incident had occurred on July 6. He was supposed to return to Ohio on July 7 and had arrived late that evening. Law enforcement had conducted a thorough inspection of the Dodge vehicle, paying special attention to its radiator and air filter. To help identify insects found in the car, investigators had enlisted the expertise of Dr. Lynn Kimsey from the Bohart Museum of Entomology at the University of California, Davis. Dr. Kimsey carefully had analyzed the insects and identified more than 100 species, including several species found only in the western region beyond the Rocky Mountains. The presence of some insects suggested that Vincent had moved at night. By carefully analyzing the insects, Dr. Kimsey had been able to plot a path that showed the car had traveled west from Ohio. Investigators later had tracked down the 5 previous car renters and confirmed that none of them had driven the car to California or near the Rocky Mountains. Police also had examined photographic evidence and found the end of a rubber glove in the laundry room. DNA testing showed a match. It belonged to none other than Vincent Brothers. Detective Watts had discovered that Vincent had been planning to leave town and had begun selling his assets, including putting his house on the market. As a result, Vincent had been arrested on April 30, 2004 and charged with 5 counts of first-degree murder. The trial began in 2007, with prosecutor Lisa Green leading the case. The prosecution argued that Vincent's motive for the murder had been financial, suggesting he had acted out of fear of having to pay child support due to his impending divorce from Joni. The prosecution portrayed Vincent as a serial adulterer who often had disappeared for long periods of time and who could become violent. To support their case, the prosecution called several witnesses, including Dr. Lynn Kimsey, who testified that the insects found in the Dodge were consistent with insects commonly found along Interstate 70. This testimony was further supported by evidence showing 5,424 miles had been driven from July 2 to July 11 in accordance with the prosecution's statement. However, when Melvin had appeared in court, he tried to change his previous testimony, claiming that he had lied to the police about Vincent giving him a credit card to use. In response, the defense presented an expert on high-speed driving, who argued that maintaining an average speed of 70 miles per hour during the trip from Ohio to California had been extremely difficult. The defense also presented its pathologists, who testified that the murders could have occurred as late as Monday morning, July 7, 2003. The defense also had presented interrogation tapes to prove that Melvin had been pressured by police to change his statement. Additionally, they called a witness who claimed to have seen a car accident involving Vincent on Sunday morning, in which a boy on a bicycle had collided with Vincent's rental car at an intersection. Although the incident had not been reported to the police due to the lack of damage or injuries, the prosecution attempted to verify the story. Vincent had taken it upon himself to defend himself. He had strongly denied all accusations about his married life and had firmly denied the accusation of murdering his family. Throughout his testimony, Vincent had become emotional and had shed tears several times. The prosecution had called Carla Tuya, principal of Franklin School, as a witness. She had testified about her past relationship with Vincent, which had begun in 1996 when his son was born and had ended in 2002 when she had decided to end it. Carla revealed a shocking secret that she and Vincent had been intimate just weeks before the family tragedy, directly contradicting Vincent's previous denials about everything. This admission had damaged Vincent's claim to fidelity to his family. The prosecution had argued that the crime had been carefully planned in advance. Thanks to knowing the family's Sunday habits, the murderer had gained an advantage and had had the opportunity to strike. The perpetrator had taken advantage of this and had waited until the whole family was asleep, then had used the spare key to enter the house through the sliding glass door and had killed each family member. On May 15, 2017, Vincent had been found guilty of 5 counts of first-degree murder, making him eligible for the death penalty. The jury had reached this decision after hearing testimony from 137 witnesses and deliberating for nearly 2 days. After the verdict, Vincent had been removed from the courtroom and had been returned to the Luro detention facility under tight security. Then, on September 27, 2007, Dirk County Superior Court Judge Michael Bush had sentenced Vincent Brothers to death by lethal injection. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Kirsten Hatfield. Kirsten Hatfield was born on February 12, 1989, in Midwest City, Oklahoma. Kirsten's father left the family soon after her birth, and her mother, Shannon, moved back in with grandparents. When Kirsten was 2 years old, they moved to their own home. Later, Shannon remarried, but the marriage was short-lived, leaving Shannon to care for her 2 young daughters alone. Kirsten, being the older sibling, took on a lot of responsibility, helping her mother care for her younger sister, Faith. Kirsten and Faith shared a bedroom, while their mother slept in the adjacent room. On May 13, 1997, Shannon put her daughters to bed as usual. Kirsten was 8 years old, and Faith was 3. However, Faith had already fallen asleep, so Shannon only said goodnight to Kirsten and left the door to their room slightly open, as she always did, in case Kirsten or Faith needed her. At around 3 a.m., Shannon was awoken by a noise coming from the girls' room. Thinking one of her daughters was awake, Shannon got out of bed to check on them. As she approached the door, the noise stopped. Assuming her daughters had gone back to sleep, Shannon was about to return to her room when she noticed that the door to their room was now completely closed. This was unusual, as she was certain she had left it slightly open. She wondered if one of them had closed the door or if she had simply forgotten to leave it open. Shannon opened the door slightly to check, but she didn't enter the room before returning to bed. Shannon went to wake up her daughters at 6:30 a.m. the next morning, but only found Faith in their bedroom. Shannon asked Faith where Kirsten was, and when Faith said she didn't know, Shannon began a thorough search of the house. However, Kirsten was nowhere to be found. Shannon then checked outside the house and contacted the parents of Kirsten's friends to see if she had come to their house. But no one had seen her. Shannon's search efforts led her to call her father, who lived nearby, to see if Kirsten had gone to his house or not. Unfortunately, he hadn't seen her either. At this point, Shannon realized Kirsten was missing, and her father advised her to call the police. When the police arrived, they initially thought Kirsten might be hiding in the house or had simply wandered off for a walk, given the town's low crime rate. However, upon inspecting Kirsten's room, they found the window slightly open with a few drops of blood on the frame. This raised their suspicions that something more serious had occurred. Further investigation led them to discover a piece of children's underwear stained with blood on the ground outside the window. After confirming with Shannon that the underwear belonged to Kirsten, the police realized they were likely dealing with a kidnapping. More officers were called to the scene to assist with the investigation, which marked the beginning of a more extensive search for Kirsten. The police investigation into Kirsten's disappearance began with a search of the area around the house. During this search, the police spoke with Kirsten's mother, who reported hearing a noise at 3 a.m. and now realized that it may have been the sound of her daughter being taken. Despite the search, nothing suspicious was found, and the police began canvassing the neighborhood, speaking with all the residents. Unfortunately, none of the neighbors reported seeing or hearing anything unusual on the night of the abduction. However, one neighbor did mention being woken up by a barking dog around 3 a.m., which coincided with the time of the abduction. With no solid leads, investigators turned to a child psychologist to interview Faith, who was only 3 years old. Despite her young age, Faith was able to share what she had witnessed, but her statement was limited to a single phrase: "A bad person came and took my sister." This confirmed that Kirsten had not left the house voluntarily, but unfortunately, it did not provide any further information about the perpetrator or Kirsten's whereabouts. Detectives had to restart the investigation practically from scratch. Their initial suspicion leaned towards someone who knew Kirsten well, as it seemed unlikely that a stranger could abduct her from her own room without a sound. Working on this theory, police discovered that Kirsten's mother, Shannon, had a history of drug-related problems. The detectives considered the possibility that the abduction might be related to this. Perhaps the mother owed money to some people in the criminal underworld, and they decided to take her daughter as payment. The police did not rule out the mother willingly handing over her daughter. This would explain why the abduction happened almost silently. The investigation into Kirsten's disappearance continued, with detectives initially speaking to Shannon, her mother. Shannon denied any involvement, claiming to have been clean from substance abuse for some time and insisting she would never harm her daughter. Although detectives were not convinced of Shannon's innocence, they could not find any evidence to prove her involvement. The police then turned to the public for help, using the media to ask for any information that might be relevant to the case. In response, they received hundreds of calls, but most of the calls were fruitless. However, one clue provided a promising lead. A woman reported her boyfriend's suspicious behavior, including aggressive outbursts and a disturbing threat he made during an argument. The police investigated the man and discovered that he knew Shannon's brother, which meant Kirsten might have known him too. Additionally, the man had a history of drug use and assault, and he had previously been familiar with the Hatfield family home. Despite this, the investigation ultimately found that the man had a solid alibi for the time Kirsten went missing. Multiple witnesses confirmed that he was at a bar until around 4 a.m. on the night of the disappearance, making it impossible for him to have abducted Kirsten. Detectives pursued multiple leads, but each one led to a dead end. As time passed, the hope of finding Kirsten alive began to fade. Kirsten's mother, Shannon, refused to give up. She took matters into her own hands, determined to find her daughter. She gave interviews to local media outlets, distributed flyers, and even investigated potential suspects on her own. However, Shannon faced numerous obstacles. Many local businesses refused to display Kirsten's flyers, citing company policies. She also attempted to meet with the state governor, but was unsuccessful. Shannon established a volunteer center to help find Kirsten. The center focused on distributing flyers and engaging with the media. However, Shannon encountered new challenges. Some volunteers stole money, lied about their work, and used the media to gain attention for themselves. Despite these setbacks, Shannon persevered in her search for the truth. After years of effort, Shannon realized that her approach was not yielding results. She enrolled in college, earned a degree in criminology, and became a parole officer. Shannon's goal was not only to find her daughter's kidnapper but also to protect others from potentially dangerous criminals who might be released from prison. Shannon suspected Kirsten's kidnapper had a history of violent crimes. To pursue this lead, she researched people with violent pasts in her area but found no connection to Kirsten's disappearance. Despite her efforts, she eventually had to accept that Kirsten might have passed away and might not return. Still, Shannon continued to search for answers. Periodically, police reopened the case to investigate new leads, working with the FBI to create an updated sketch of Kirsten's possible appearance. In 2014, there was a breakthrough in the Kirsten case. A woman contacted the police and shared a shocking discovery she had made while sorting through her late mother's belongings. Among her mother's possessions was a diary detailing the woman's father's confession, claiming he had killed Kirsten Hatfield. The diary was extremely detailed, and detectives were convinced of its accuracy. According to the diary, the man had kidnapped Kirsten from her bedroom, took her to a house he owned in a nearby town, and murdered her after horribly torturing her. The description of the crime process spanned many pages, leaving even veteran investigators confused. The diary also revealed that the crime had been recorded on a videotape. Investigators immediately questioned the woman's father. However, his reaction was surprising. While he denied any involvement in the Kirsten case, he asserted that he had known who was responsible for Kirsten's death, saying the murder had occurred at his ex-girlfriend's house. The police were confused and asked for the house address. They quickly received a warrant and sent a team to thoroughly search this house. The forensic investigation began with a crucial step: the use of luminol, a substance that glows when exposed to very small amounts of blood. When the forensic team applied luminol to the scene, they were surprised by the results. An expert later described the house as lit up like a Christmas tree due to the numerous bloodstains. The bloodstains matched the details of the murder described in the diary, leading the team to believe they had finally found concrete evidence. To investigate further, police removed the floorboards, cut out sections of wallpaper and sent these items to a laboratory for analysis. They also organized an excavation team in the hope of finding the victim's body. In addition, the police also discovered a box containing hundreds of videotapes in the house, so they had to review the diary. They suspected that one of the tapes might have contained footage of the victim being abused. Detectives meticulously reviewed each tape, but after hours of analysis, none of the tapes were related to the murder. Excavations also proved fruitless, with no remains or evidence found in the soil. However, just when the investigation seemed to have been gaining momentum, the police encountered an unexpected and shocking episode. Experts who analyzed the bloodstains in the house concluded that the bloodstains had actually belonged to an animal, not a human. This revelation left the police stunned and wondering what had just happened. Had someone deliberately deceived them with a cruel joke? Or was the person writing the diary struggling with mental health issues and convinced by a false narrative that had developed in their mind? The truth was still unknown. Detectives had run out of leads in Kirsten's case, and the case was once again stalled. In an effort to revive the investigation, the case was reassigned to a new detective named Daryl Miller in the summer of 2015. Miller decided to start from scratch and review all existing documents and records. During his scrutiny, Miller discovered something surprising. His predecessors had overlooked some key evidence, including blood found on Kirsten's windowsill and on her underwear. The evidence had been stored in a warehouse, but shockingly had never been sent to a laboratory for analysis. Miller suspected that the reason for this might have been because police initially thought the blood belonged to Kirsten, which would not have yielded any useful results. However, Miller decided to send them to the laboratory for analysis. The results were surprising. The blood sample did not belong to Kirsten, but to an unidentified man. This was a significant breakthrough after many years of investigation. Miller decided to collect DNA samples from all the men who had participated in the investigation since the kidnapping. Police tracked down each person on the list and sent their DNA to a lab for analysis. Everyone was cooperative and provided their DNA samples quickly. Miller patiently waited for the results, and finally he received a call from the lab. Experts had analyzed one of the samples and found a perfect match with bloodstains found on the window and the victim's underwear. The DNA belonged to Anthony Palma, 56. The Hatfield family's neighbor who lived across the street. Anthony had been one of the first people the police spoke to on the day of the abduction. At the time, he claimed to have woken up around 3 a.m. due to his dog barking. Now that his DNA had been linked to the crime scene, detectives decided to bring him in for further questioning. Although the DNA evidence was sufficient for a conviction, the investigators hoped to obtain a confession from Anthony. A confession would expedite the trial and potentially lead them to Kirsten's body, which was still missing. To get Anthony to talk, the detectives invited him for questioning, telling him it was a routine process. They claimed they were re-interviewing everyone, including neighbors, to gather new information. In reality, their goal was to get Anthony to admit whether he had ever been inside the Hatfield family home. Detectives asked Anthony to recall any additional details about the night in question. He retold the same story he had shared 18 years earlier. But this time he added a new detail. He claimed to have seen a white car parked outside Kirsten's house, although he didn't think much of it at the time. The police then asked Anthony about his relationship with Kirsten and her family. He stated that he knew them as neighbors, but he had never interacted with Kirsten personally. He maintained that he got along well with the other neighborhood children, who would often ask him for help fixing their bikes or visit him for candy. This conversation became a critical point in the investigation, as the police had discovered Anthony's blood on the windowsill of Kirsten's bedroom. When they asked if he had ever entered the house, Anthony claimed he had not. This statement raised suspicions, as the presence of his blood suggested otherwise. The detectives faced a challenge. Anthony's blood was fresh, suggesting it had been left recently, but he had had a visit to the house when it belonged to a friend. The investigators decided to move forward with the interrogation, informing Anthony that his blood had been found in Kirsten's room and on her underwear. Anthony repeatedly denied ever entering the house, despite the evidence to the contrary. The investigators attempted to extract a confession, but he consistently maintained his innocence. The detectives changed their approach and exited the room, leaving Detective Miller to speak with Anthony privately. Miller entered with a photo of Kirsten, placing it in front of Anthony. However, Anthony promptly pushed the photo away, refusing to look at it for the remainder of the conversation. Miller asked various questions, attempting to prompt Anthony into a confession, but he continued to deny any involvement. Failing to obtain an admission of guilt, the police ended the interrogation and apprehended Anthony. A subsequent search of his residence, made possible by a search warrant, uncovered no evidence of Kirsten's remains or any other relevant evidence. During the trial, Anthony repeatedly denied any involvement in the crime. But DNA evidence told a different story. As the trial progressed, new details emerged that the police had initially overlooked. It was revealed that Anthony had a history of run-ins with the law, including a prior conviction for breaking into a girl's bedroom and assaulting her. He had also been imprisoned in the 1980s for a violent attack involving a weapon. Anthony's past convictions signaled his dangerousness, yet were overlooked in 1997. In 2017, a jury returned a guilty verdict for Kirsten's kidnapping and Kirsten's murder, and Anthony was sentenced to life in prison. Despite the guilty verdict, Anthony never disclosed the location of Kirsten's body. Kirsten's mother refused to give up hope, however. She consistently reached out to Anthony, calling and visiting him in prison, in an effort to find out where Kirsten's body was. She spent hours trying to extract the truth from him, but ultimately, she was unsuccessful. Tragically, in 2019, Anthony was killed by his cellmate, who was motivated by a desire for revenge for Anthony's horrific crime against a child. As a result, Kirsten's family's only hope of finding Kirsten's body now depends on hikers or tourists who might stumble upon it in remote national parks, where Anthony may have buried her. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Autumn Taggart. Autumn Taggart, a single mother, lived in Windsor, a city near the Michigan-Ontario border, with her 9-year-old son Gavin in 2018. Despite her breakup with Gavin's father, Chris Sherwin, they remained on good terms to minimize the impact on their child. On Saturday, June 9, 2018, Autumn and Gavin spent the afternoon with Chris, and after grocery shopping together, he dropped them off at their third-floor apartment. After Chris left, Gavin played video games with his mother before bedtime, unaware of the horrifying night that was about to unfold. Gavin woke up to a noise while it was still dark outside. Startled, he opened his eyes to see a strange man standing close to his bed. The man instructed Gavin to close his eyes and go back to sleep before leaving the room. Gavin knew his mother's room was located behind the wall to the right, as shown in the photo. About a minute later, he heard his mother scream. The boy had never felt such intense fear before. The screaming eventually stopped, and an eerie silence fell over the space. After a few minutes, Gavin fell asleep, overcome with exhaustion. Gavin woke up to find it was already morning. He got out of bed and went straight to his mother's room. He was met with a scene of utter destruction. Everything was smashed and broken. His mother, Autumn, was lying on the bed, but she wasn't asleep. At first, 9-year-old Gavin thought she was just resting, but the blood on her nose told a different story. The reality hit him like a ton of bricks. His mother was dead. Gavin was in denial, refusing to accept the truth. To distract himself from the grim reality, he spent the morning playing video games on his console and watching YouTube videos, trying to avoid the unpleasant fact that his deceased mother was lying in the next room. In the afternoon, Gavin couldn't take the pressure anymore and broke down in tears. He decided to confide in someone, so he went to his mother's room, took her phone, and messaged his father on Messenger. He typed out a desperate message. Autumn wasn't waking up. Chris and his girlfriend quickly got in their car and drove to Gavin and Autumn's home. When they arrived, Chris parked the car and got out, spotting his son standing behind a sliding glass door on the 3rd floor. However, Chris didn't have an electronic key to enter the building, so Gavin came downstairs to let him in. Chris asked his son to wait with his girlfriend while he went to investigate why Autumn wasn't waking up. Chris entered the apartment, proceeded to the bedroom, and was shocked to see Autumn's pale appearance. Her face and body were bruised, and her nose was bloody. He immediately dialed 911. The police and an ambulance arrived at the address he provided, where the paramedics examined Autumn's body and surveyed the signs of struggle in the bedroom. Given the extent of her injuries and the evidence of a fierce fight, they sadly had no option but to pronounce her dead, concluding that it was no accident. Investigators searched the apartment for clues, while a specialist in child interrogation spoke with Gavin, who revealed that an overnight guest had instructed him to go to bed. Gavin recounted hearing his mother's screams, but they abruptly ceased. He provided a description of the man he saw in his room that night, saying he appeared to be a white male of average height with messy hair, resembling someone who had just rolled out of bed. According to Gavin, the man was skinny, but not too skinny. The autopsy concluded that Autumn's death was the result of strangulation. Furthermore, it was discovered that she had been physically assaulted prior to her death, with injuries found in her genital area. Additionally, male DNA samples were recovered from her body. The investigation aimed to address several key questions, including how the perpetrator gained access to the apartment, what motivated the crime, and most crucially, the identity of the individual who had entry to the building, as an electronic key was required for entry. The police quickly ruled out the possibility that the killer was one of the building's residents, since Gavin was familiar with all his neighbors and the man he spotted on the night of the murder was not among them. To commit the crime, the perpetrator would have needed not only an electronic key to access the building, but also a way to enter Autumn's apartment, which presented a problem. There were no signs of forced entry on the door to her apartment, suggesting that either she had let the perpetrator in voluntarily or had failed to lock the door. Eventually, the police abandoned their initial assumptions when they discovered evidence that the perpetrator had accessed the 3rd floor. It emerged that the individual had first climbed up to the 2nd floor balcony and then made their way to the 3rd floor, where they found the door was already open, allowing them to enter the apartment unimpeded. In addition to the DNA sample, the police also found fingerprints at the scene, which they were working to match to their owner. It wasn't until 12 days after the body was discovered that the police finally released the victim's identity, in the hope that this would lead to new tips from the public. The authorities are seeking anyone with information that could aid the investigation to come forward and contact the detectives. A witness reported seeing a new black SUV, possibly a Honda Pilot, in the parking lot adjacent to the building on the night of the crime. The vehicle was seen in the lot until around 6 a.m. Detectives believe the SUV's owner may have been involved in Autumn's death and hypothesized that the individual used the roof of their car as a stepping stone to climb higher. Specifically, they think the perpetrator exploited the building's decorative protrusions, which resemble steps, to ascend from the 2nd floor to the 3rd. The nighttime crime scene presented an advantage to investigators as most people are asleep then, resulting in fewer mobile phones being active. By analyzing phone activity in Autumn's area, They were able to narrow down the list of active numbers near the crime scene. During the investigation, detectives found that one of the phone numbers belonged to a neighbor of Autumn's, who lived in the same building. Although the neighbor claimed to know nothing about the incident during her police interview, her alibi didn't quite add up. Phone records showed that she had made calls from her apartment and various locations around the city, and her phone was switched off around the time Autumn's life was taken. While it was difficult to pinpoint her exact location due to the margin of error in phone tracking, it was clear that she was being evasive and hiding something from the detectives. So they went to speak with Michelle again. She reiterated that she didn't know anything and hadn't heard anything, but the police subtly warned her that if it was later discovered she had withheld vital information from the investigation, she could be considered an accomplice to the crime. As a result, she began to talk. Michelle said that around 2 a.m. that night, a man known to them as Jay got in touch with her and her boyfriend. Jay was looking to buy illegal drugs and also wanted to hire an escort. The three of them drove to an ATM where Jay withdrew some cash. After that, Michelle and her boyfriend handed over a certain amount of the drug to Jay. Michelle admitted that she and her boyfriend were drug dealers. Later, Jay asked them to sell him more drugs. According to Michelle, she then told Jay to drive to the parking lot near her building. Michelle confessed that she and her boyfriend had planned to rob Jay. Upon arrival at the building, the three individuals ingested illicit drugs. Following this, Michelle and her boyfriend resolved to abscond with the remaining drugs. Prior to their escape, Michelle concealed a bag of the drugs within her genital area. According to Michelle, she and her boyfriend escaped, stealing not just the substance, but also a significant amount of Jay's money. They fled to the building's entrance, then went up to the apartment, where they barricaded themselves inside, sitting silently in the dark. Jay was unable to enter the building since he lacked an electronic key, and he couldn't yell or honk his horn, fearing that someone might alert the police. According to Michelle, when they looked out the window, they noticed shoe marks on the roof of Jay's car. Additionally, a man was seen driving away at approximately 6 a.m. Investigators theorized that Jay must have climbed into the building, attempting to track down those responsible for stealing the substance and money from him. However, as he was unaware of Michelle's residence, it's likely that he inadvertently entered Autumn's apartment by mistake. The police obtained the suspect's phone number and photo from a camera at the bank entrance, where he withdrew cash to buy the substance, and from an ATM camera. Investigators learned that the man's real name was Jitesh Bogle, a 27-year-old Canadian citizen who lived and worked as a car development engineer in Warren, Michigan. He was also the owner of a black Honda Pilot SUV and frequently crossed the river by bridge or tunnel to visit Canada, specifically Windsor, almost daily. Authorities tracked the suspect's movements, discovering he had left Canada on June 10th, the morning Autumn died, and had not returned to the country since. Following the police release of information about the black SUV seen at the victim's house, Jitesh sold his car. Canadian police collaborated with their American counterparts, learning Jitesh planned to relocate from Michigan to Washington State, where his parents resided in Kent. The combination of his decision to move, disposing of the car, and ceasing visits to Canada raised strong suspicions, but the police required concrete evidence to arrest and extradite him to Canada. The Windsor police requested assistance from the U.S. National Security Agency in their investigation and asked them to closely monitor the suspect's activities. DNA evidence found on Autumn's body suggested it belonged to Jitesh, but to confirm this, they needed to obtain a DNA sample from him for comparison. U.S. agents tracked the suspect's every move, aware that he was planning to relocate to Washington State and fearing he might flee to another country. In an effort to alter his appearance, Jitesh shaved his beard and started wearing blue contact lenses. Fortunately for the investigators, Jitesh was reckless. One day, he visited a bar in Warren, where where he spent several hours drinking. When he downed his last glass and exited the bar, the agent swiftly seized the glass, thereby obtaining a DNA sample from it. Although it took some time to compare this new sample with the one found on Autumn's body, the outcome was not unexpected. The male DNA discovered on the victim's body was identified as a match to Jitesh Bogle's DNA. On August 17, 2018, nearly 2.5 months following Autumn Taggart's tragic demise, Jitesh was taken into custody at his parents' residence in Kent, Washington, a development that caught him off guard, as he appeared to believe the authorities would be unable to locate him. The U.S. authorities promptly initiated the extradition process to have him returned to his native country. In the supporting extradition documents, the prosecutor underscored Jitesh's perceived threats to public safety, his high risk of fleeing, and his unpredictable nature. Soon after, Canadian authorities charged him with the murder of Autumn Taggart. Due to pandemic-related restrictions, the trial was delayed for an extended period. However, it finally began in November 2021. To maintain social distancing, the proceedings took place in 3 separate courtrooms: the main courtroom, where the judge, prosecutor, jury, and the defendant with his defense team were seated, and 2 additional courtrooms equipped with large screens broadcasting the trial to Autumn's family members and other observers. Jitesh Bogle denied committing first-degree deprivation of life, claiming he unintentionally killed Autumn. He explained that earlier, some thieves stole money and drugs from his car, leaving him upset. After consuming a large amount of alcohol and substances, he got out of the vehicle to search for the thieves. Due to his intoxication, he didn't recall many events from that night. However, he remembered climbing onto the balcony and entering the apartment where Autumn was sleeping, mistakenly thinking she was Michelle, the woman who had robbed him. When Autumn awoke and started screaming, he ordered her to be quiet, but she disobeyed. In response, he covered her mouth, which led to her suffocation. Only after the screaming stopped did Jitesh realize he had accidentally taken Autumn's life, and he attempted to perform CPR on her, but it was too late. Jitesh had no memory of how Autumn's genital injuries occurred or how he left her apartment. His lawyers requested that the first-degree life imprisonment charges be dropped, arguing that the crime was not premeditated. They believed Jitesh was unaware of his actions due to the large quantity of substances he had consumed. The fact that he placed his hand over Autumn's mouth suggests he wanted her to be quiet, not dead. According to defense lawyer Peter Thorning, Jitesh lacked the capacity to form intent or understand the consequences of his actions. Thorning claimed that intoxication was the sole explanation for Jitesh's behavior, and that sometimes tragic events occur without intending the outcome. He stated that Autumn's death was not intentional, and that Jitesh was either too intoxicated to realize his actions could cause death or did not appreciate the consequences. Jitesh's lawyers argued that there was no evidence to suggest the defendant had sexual intercourse with the victim. Although Jitesh's DNA was found on Autumn's body, it was not seminal fluid, according to the lawyers. They suggested that the DNA could have been transferred through cross-contamination, where DNA is accidentally transferred from one surface to another, possibly through the forensic expert's gloves. The defense team attempted to convince the jury that John Lort, a forensic expert involved in the investigation, had botched his job and inadvertently transferred Jitesh's DNA to Autumn Taggart's body. As part of his role, Lort was responsible for photographing the crime scene and collecting evidence that came into direct contact with the victim. Jitesh's defense lawyer, Peter Thorning, questioned Lort about the possibility of DNA or fluid transfer from the body to the bed sheet or vice versa during the manipulation of the body, which is a known phenomenon referred to as cross-contamination. Lort stated during cross-examination that he changed gloves between handling each piece of evidence and using his camera to take photographs, thus preventing cross-contamination. In his examination of evidence in Taggart's room, Lort searched for bodily fluids such as urine, saliva, and semen. as he explained that in cases involving a deceased female victim, the likelihood of sexual assault is higher compared to cases involving a male victim. Lort testified to the court that he did not find any fluid evidence consistent with sexual assault. He acknowledged that his examination of the body was limited, as he was not a trained medical professional, such as a coroner. Lort testified that there were no obvious signs of a struggle at Autumn's apartment, such as broken furniture or glass, forced entry, tampered locks, or blood spatter. In contrast, the prosecutor believed that the defendant's actions constituted a search for hidden substances, similar to how Michelle had hidden them in her genital area. The prosecutor argued that the defendant committed sexual assault by searching Autumn's body in the same way, regardless of whether he used his hand. When questioned by the prosecutor about why he didn't call 911 when Autumn stopped breathing, Jitesh disagreed, saying he didn't think it was necessary. Jitesh responded that he feared the police would arrest him because he knew nobody would take his word for it. He could hardly believe his own story, as he recounted in his testimony. Jitesh acknowledged that his memory of the events in Autumn's room was hazy. However, he did recall performing CPR on Autumn after she had stopped screaming. Previously, he had testified that he remembered counting 5 or 6 ribs down before starting CPR, and that he had done 15 compressions accompanied by 3 breaths. The prosecutor also challenged the defendant's claim that the strangulation of the victim was accidental. He pointed out that if the defendant simply wanted to silence Autumn, he could have covered her mouth with his hand. Instead, he also pinched her nose shut, which deliberately prevented her from breathing. Moreover, he sustained this grip for a period of time, indicating that he was fully aware of his actions. Chris Sherwin, Autumn Taggart's former partner and the father of their son, was the last person to hear from her via text message around 12:30 a.m. on June 10th. After sending a follow-up text and receiving no response, he grew concerned. It wasn't until later that day that he received a text from Autumn's phone, only to discover it was their son responding. The court displayed a copy of these text messages for the jury to review on December 1st, 2021. Following deliberation, the 12-person jury found Jitesh Bogle guilty of depriving Autumn of her life. Despite allegations, they found no convincing evidence that Jitesh had engaged in sexual intercourse with Autumn. Autumn's father, John Taggar, expressed relief and gratitude for the verdict, stating, "Can't say we weren't nervous, but it's definitely the right verdict. Autumn deserved this. Her son deserved this. Justice. That's what we wanted. That's what we got." The family members were visibly relieved, hugging each other in celebration. On January 5th, 2022, the court sentenced Jitesh Bogle to life imprisonment, with a minimum of 25 years before he is eligible for parole. Jitesh appeared in court via video from jail, wearing an orange jumpsuit and a black mask. During the victim impact statements, he sat quietly against the wall, distant from the camera. When given the opportunity to speak, he expressed remorse, saying, "It's hard to express the sorrow and remorse I feel. I am happy for the family that they have a sense of justice, and they can move on. Part of my soul died that day as well." Autumn's father, John Taggar, reiterated his desire for Canadian laws to change, stating, "We'd still like to see the laws in Canada change for life sentences to actual life, not 25 years and then parole. We'd like life to mean life for all victims." Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Nicole Laub. Around 5 p.m. on August 19, 2014, a man called Portland's Emergency Services in Oregon, USA, to report a woman who had been stabbed in the chest. The victim was still alive but struggling to breathe, so the caller urged the operator to send an ambulance to the Timber Creek apartments as quickly as possible. As police officers rushed to the scene, they had no idea that the victim's final words would hold the key to cracking the case. The victim, later identified as Nicole Laub, had been receiving assistance from the couple living at the crime scene when paramedics arrived. Despite their best efforts, Nicole sadly succumbed to her injuries, but not before uttering a crucial phrase. The detectives spoke with the 911 caller, who provided a more detailed account of what had occurred. While walking down the stairs of the apartment building towards the parking lot with his wife, the man heard a scream. He turned to his right and saw a woman running towards them, shouting, "He stabbed me. He stabbed me." The woman explained to the couple that she did not know her attacker, but was able to describe him as wearing camo pants and a black hoodie. The manager of the Timber Creek Apartments identified a 29-year-old colleague, Nicole Loeb, as the victim. She had been working as a leasing consultant at the complex for a few weeks. On August 19th, as part of her duties, Nicole drove a golf cart around the complex to deliver lease renewal letters to residents. Each applicable resident also received a balloon tied to a package of popcorn. Based on Nicole's notes and the map found in the golf cart, detectives pinpointed the likely location of the attack to a specific stairwell breezeway at Timber Creek. They also discovered several pieces of evidence that supported this theory, including a trail of blood droplets leading from the stairwell and leaflets scattered at the foot of the stairs. During the investigation led by the Washington County Sheriff's Office, multiple witnesses came forward reporting a suspicious individual, described as a young male wearing a black hoodie and camel-colored pants, seen in the vicinity of Timber Creek around the time of the attack. By analyzing the reports and timelines of each sighting, detectives were able to reconstruct the path the suspect took to enter and exit Timber Creek. Over 20 law enforcement officers, aided by K-9 units, conducted an intensive search. The Washington County Search and Rescue Team focused on the wooded areas surrounding Cedar Mill Creek, which flows through the Timber Creek apartment complex. During the search, several items were found and sent to the lab for analysis to determine their potential evidentiary value. While the detectives did not reveal the specifics of their discoveries, they stated that they were exploring every possible scenario. The investigators were working to determine the motive behind the brazen daylight attack in an apartment complex home to over 1,000 residents. They informed Chris Loeb, Nicole's husband, about the incident. Nicole already had a daughter when she met Chris, who had 2 daughters from previous relationships. The couple later had a son together after getting married. As a teenager, Nicole survived cancer and developed an interest in fitness and bodybuilding. She took part in competitions and aspired to become a coach someday. The police took steps to identify the perpetrator, ruling out robbery as a motive, since nothing was stolen and no attempt was made to remove her clothes. This led detectives to suspect that the attack might be motivated by personal reasons, prompting them to focus their attention on Chris, Nicole's husband. As William once wrote, "Love that transcends this world cannot be separated by it. Death cannot destroy what is immortal." Nicole was an extraordinary woman, a devoted wife, exceptional mother, and a friend to everyone. She was never afraid to express her faith or opinions openly with others. Her ultimate goal was to leave this world a better place than when she entered it. Meanwhile, during interviews with Timber Creek Apartments residents, police identified 2 additional witnesses who reported seeing a man wearing a black hoodie and camouflage pants. This couple claimed to have seen a man matching the suspect's description running across the road without looking around, approximately at the same time Nicole was attacked. The witnesses saw the man, with his hood up, running towards the houses directly across the street from the Timber Creek Apartments. Based on witness descriptions, detectives created a composite sketch of the suspect, which was promptly distributed throughout the city and featured on television news programs. Authorities urged anyone who recognized the individual, even if only slightly, to come forward with information. Detectives collaborated with their informants, seeking any information that could lead them to the murderer's whereabouts. The suspect's sketch generated several promising leads. One such lead came from a man who claimed his son was acquainted with an individual named Taylor. Allegedly, Taylor had been intimidating people with a knife recently. The police located Taylor and brought him in for questioning. During the interrogation, Taylor made some bizarre statements, leading investigators to suspect he might be struggling with mental health issues. When asked about Nicole, Taylor responded unequivocally, stating he was responsible for her death. However, his story was riddled with inconsistencies, parroting details from the news and fabricating unrelated information. Consequently, the police ruled Taylor out as a suspect. After the police released the suspect's sketch to the news, they received a new lead about a man named Nick with a prior criminal record. Although Nick bore some resemblance to the sketch, his criminal history did not involve physical harm to others. The police brought Nick in for questioning, but his behavior raised suspicions. When questioned about Nicole's case, Nick denied any involvement and requested a lawyer. Following this, the police obtained a search warrant for Nick's home, where they found a black hoodie and camouflage pants. However, the hoodie did not match the witness's description, as it featured a prominent white logo on the front. The police sent the clothing to the lab for analysis, but no evidence linking Nick to the crime was found. They also obtained Nick's mobile phone records, which showed he was not near the crime scene at the time of Nicole's attack. As a result, the police cleared Nick as a suspect, and the investigation came to a standstill. Chris Lobby spoke to reporters about the difficult time his family was going through. He couldn't shake off the thoughts of what had happened to Nicole, his mind constantly racing with unanswered questions and different scenarios. "The hardest part is not having answers," he said. The police were concerned the perpetrator might strike again, and sadly, their fears were realized. On September 13, 2014, just 3 weeks after Nicole's death, the Eugene Police Department in Oregon received a disturbing call. Eugene is Oregon's second-largest city, located about 100 miles from Portland. On September 13th, a resident was attacked while leaving a bar near Autzen Stadium after watching a game. That evening, 39-year-old Heather Miller had gone to a nearby bar to watch the game. When the game ended around 8 p.m., she decided to head home. Since the streets were almost empty, she left the bar to call a cab, but discovered her phone was out of battery. Her next move was to walk closer to the stadium in hopes of hailing a taxi. While walking along the sidewalk, she soon noticed that someone was walking behind her. Crossing to the other side of the street and turning around, she saw that the man following her had done the same. She quickened her pace, but soon felt a blow to the back of her head, which knocked her unconscious. When she regained consciousness, she found herself face to face with the criminal, who by this time had pulled off her pants in an effort to fulfill what was most likely the motive for the attack. Heather tried to reason with him. She told him she had a daughter and asked him to please let her see her daughter again, but he kept punching her regardless. Heather said that for every word she uttered, she received a punch in the face. At some point, Heather realized that her only chance to survive was to pretend to be dead. She closed her eyes and didn't move. When the attacker got what he wanted, he immediately ran away. This man severely beat Heather, but she found the strength to stand up and walk out into the middle of the road. A minute later, a car stopped and the driver called 911. Paramedics soon arrived and took her to the hospital. She was conscious and was able to talk to a detective who arrived soon after. At that time, neither she nor the detective knew that the one who attacked her was already at the police station. There's a park near the stadium where the man attacked Heather. A policeman on a bicycle was on duty there that evening. He saw a man running away, stopped him, and noticed that his hands and shoes were bloody. The officer detained him and called a patrol car, which took the detainee to the police station. Despite his age, 17-year-old Jamie Tinoco had repeatedly come to the attention of the police. At the time of his arrest, he was on probation for unlawful possession. Tinoco started using substances at the age of 12, and according to his parents, they could not control him. He dropped out of high school when he was a freshman, and just a day before the attack on Heather Meir, he was arrested for driving without a driver's license but was soon released. During interrogation, Tinoco confessed to attacking Heather. The guy behaved absolutely calmly and indifferently because he had believed he'd done nothing wrong. His behavior gave the Eugene Police Department reason to assume that Heather was not his first victim. The police released his photo, thinking that there might be other women affected by his actions who would come forward. After releasing Tinoco's photo, the Eugene police caught the attention of detectives investigating Nicole Laub's death. They noticed that Tinoco's facial features bore a strong resemblance to those of the suspect in their composite sketch. As they dug deeper, they discovered that Tinoco resided with his parents in Portland, and their apartment was conveniently located directly across the street from Timber Creek. This alarming coincidence further fueled their suspicion that Tinoco might be the perpetrator responsible for Nicole Laub's tragic demise. The detectives questioned Jamie about Nicole Laub's case, hoping he would admit to assaulting her, just as he had confessed to assaulting Heather Miller. However, Tinoco denied any involvement in Nicole's death and refused to answer their questions. Consequently, the police had to search for evidence to connect him to Nicole Laub's murder. Jamie Tinoco had lived with his parents in a residence directly opposite the Timber Creek apartment complex. Following this, the police secured a search warrant for his parents' apartment, whereupon they discovered a black hoodie and camouflage pants in Jamie's room. These items were subsequently sent to a laboratory for analysis. Nevertheless, the laboratory report proved disappointing, as it did not reveal any DNA evidence linking Nicole to any of Jamie Tinoco's possessions, and consequently the investigation stalled. Although there was no conclusive proof that Tinoco was responsible for Nicole's death, there was a significant amount of evidence connecting him to the assault on Heather Miller. During the trial related to the attack on Heather Miller, Tinoco did not dispute his involvement and even seemed to take pride in his actions, presenting himself as a youthful gang member. He was unapologetic, smiling, and conveying a sense of no remorse for what he had done. Tinoco had wandered away from a group of young offenders who were on a supervised trip with the Washington County Juvenile Department. He approached Heather from behind, hit her, knocking her out, and then pulled her into the bushes near Watson Stadium. As a result of the attack, Heather still experiences nightmares and flashbacks. She also suffered physical harm, including a chipped front tooth. Additionally, the attack left her with a broken nose and other injuries that required reconstructive surgery to fix. Since then, Heather has had to cope with the trauma by finding a new job, and even now, she becomes uncomfortable when people approach her from behind or when she walks alone on the street, especially at night. Heather Miller clutched two family members' hands as she sat with more than a dozen supporters before reading her statement aloud in the Lane County Circuit Court. Tinoco appeared to be grinning in court as the victim stood recalling the disturbing details of her attack, how she begged for her life to see her daughter again. When the judge asked Tinoco why he was grinning, he said he didn't know. The judge said the fact that he showed no remorse scared her and called Tinoco a danger to the public, imposing a maximum sentence. The victim, surrounded by her friends and family, walked out of the courtroom. As a brave mother of two, she had told the judge that she prayed Tinoco would never have the chance to harm anyone else in the same way. Refusing to be defined by her ordeal, she was determined to read her statement aloud and make her voice heard, demonstrating remarkable strength and resilience from the very beginning. The judge was not swayed by the defense's portrayal of Tinoco as a teenager whose actions were influenced by years of substance abuse. Instead, the judge formed an opinion about Tinoco's character based on his behavior in the courtroom. Tinoco's lawyer, Chris Schaffner, requested a prison sentence of 8 years and 4 months for his client. However, when the judge gave Tinoco the opportunity to address the court, he failed to apologize, despite his emotional parents sitting just a few rows behind him. Judge Deborah Vogt sentenced Tinoco to 14 years and 2 months in prison, saying his apparent lack of remorse warranted the long sentence and that the community needs to be protected from a dangerous man. She said that by the time Tinoco is eligible to be released, he'll be in his early 30s and will have to register as a sex offender for the rest of his life. Meanwhile, investigators exploited Tinoco's exaggerated self-importance to extract a confession from him. They re-questioned him about Nicole Laub's death, suggesting that he would gain more respect from fellow inmates if they knew he had taken a woman's life. After a brief silence, Tinoco began discussing Nicole, claiming he hadn't intended to harm her. He confessed that he had wanted to stab someone merely to experience the feeling. According to him, his goal wasn't to kill Nicole, but rather to injure her. He recounted that, after crossing the street from his apartment to Timber Creek, he saw Nicole parking a golf cart and carrying a small package containing a balloon to an upstairs apartment. As Nicole ascended the stairs, he hid behind a golf cart, then rushed to the stairs. And when she returned downstairs, he took a deep breath and stabbed her. Tinoco said he chose Nicole because she looked like easy prey. When asked if he had tried to force Nicole into intimacy, as he did with Heather Meller, he replied that he was thinking about doing the same. He was going to do the same. He stated that he didn't do it only because Nicole screamed really loud when he stabbed her, so he ran away. During the reenactment of the crime, Tinoco demonstrated to the investigators how he had escaped from the crime scene. Chris Laub expressed his shock upon learning that the individual responsible for taking his wife's life was only 17 years old. He stated, "As a father of a 13-year-old daughter, it's incomprehensible to think that someone just 4 years older than her could commit such a heinous act." The trial, which started in 2015, took an interesting turn when Tinoco proclaimed his innocence in court, contradicting his earlier confession during the interrogation. His lawyer emphasized that there was no DNA evidence to connect his client to the crime scene. Defense attorney Robert Axford made an emotional plea, saying, "I'm simply asking for mercy for this 17-year-old child who is severely mentally ill and has the potential to change his behavior with proper treatment to rectify the deep-seated issues he's struggling with." The defense called a second psychologist to testify, who had assessed Tinoco and concluded that he showed symptoms of schizophrenia. In contrast, a psychologist from the Oregon State Hospital, who had also examined Tinoco, disagreed, diagnosing a personality disorder rather than schizophrenia. Ultimately, the jury was convinced of Tinoco's guilt after viewing a video recording of his confession and a reenactment of the crime, which was part of the investigative experiment. During the reenactment of the crime, Tinoco revealed specific details that only the perpetrator who attacked Nicole Laub could have known. In the penalty phase, the jury faced two options: sentencing Tinoco to life imprisonment without parole, or to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 30 years. However, the jury decided that there were not enough mitigating circumstances to justify a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Consequently, Tinoco was found guilty on all counts in 2017. Tinoco, who was already 20 years old at the time, was standing at the front of a Washington County courtroom between his two attorneys as Circuit Judge Kirsten Thompson asked if he had any words before she officially sentenced him to life in prison without parole. He held his hands down below his waist in front of him, his mouth twitching. "I ask for forgiveness," Tinoco said. He then sat down. Chris Laub, Nicole's husband, said Tinoco's family approached his family after the sentencing. They expressed condolences and apologized. In 2021, the Oregon Court of Appeals overturned the 2017 conviction of Tinoco. Since his trial, juvenile laws have changed significantly. Tinoco was convicted of a Measure 11 crime, but under current juvenile reforms, offenders between 15 and 17 years old are no longer automatically sent to adult court. Instead, prosecutors must request a hearing to decide whether juveniles accused of serious crimes should be tried as adults. If Tinoco is retried and reconvicted, his defense team may seek a lesser sentence. The Lobby family, including Nicole's father, Rich Jones, were shocked and saddened by the overturned conviction, knowing they would have to relive the emotional trauma of the trial. Despite the setback, Tinoco remains in prison, and the Nicole Lobb case is far from over. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Emily Longley. Emily Longley was born in 1994 in England to Mark and Caroline Longley. 2 years later, her parents had another child, a younger sister named Hannah. From a very early age, the sisters developed a strong bond and grew up in a loving and caring family environment. When Emily turned 9 and Hannah was 7, the entire family relocated to New Zealand, making Auckland their new home. However, after moving to New Zealand, Emily began associating with an undesirable group of people. Concerned about her influence, her middle-class parents made the decision to send her back to the UK in 2010 to live with her grandparents and start anew. Emily moved to England to pursue her studies at Brockenhurst College, where she aimed to earn a business degree and harbored ambitions of becoming a model. During her time in England, she resided at her grandparents' house in Bournemouth, a popular seaside resort town located in the county of Dorset on the English Channel coast. While in England, Emily met 20-year-old Elliot Turner, who made a strong impression on her. Their communication gradually developed into a romantic relationship. In April 2011, Emily returned to New Zealand to visit her family, whom she hadn't seen for about 6 months. Her father picked her up from the airport, and Emily greeted him enthusiastically, giving him a tight hug and telling him how much she'd missed him. Emily was extremely close to her father, who adored her and missed her cheerful smile, infectious laughter, and playful dirty jokes. The next day, the whole family visited Emily's favorite pizzeria. She filled her parents in on her college life, mentioning her modeling career and the wonderful friends she'd made. She also talked about her boyfriend, Elliot Turner, and casually mentioned that she was considering ending their relationship when she got back to England, as she felt too young for something serious at that point. Emily spent the next few weeks socializing with friends and family, having a wonderful time without arousing any suspicion that she would be leaving soon. When the time came for her flight to board, she found it difficult to bid farewell to her family. However, she made a promise to return in 5 months to watch the Rugby World Cup matches, which were scheduled to begin on September 9th. A few days later, while texting her father, Emily mentioned that she had broken up with Elliot, but she didn't elaborate on the details. The reason behind the breakup was that Elliot had seen the photos Emily had posted on social media while she was in New Zealand, which showed her with other guys, and he became extremely jealous. Elliot Turner, son of a wealthy jeweler, was living a seemingly carefree life at 20 years old. He was a familiar face in Bournemouth's local bar and club scene, where he was part of a group of affluent young men known as The Firm. His friends nicknamed him All Talk Turner, due to his boasts. In December 2010, he met Emily, and the couple indulged in the resort's high life, often staying out late into the night. However, Turner's history of obsessing over women soon resurfaced, and his jealousy sparked violent arguments in the relationship. Those who knew him described Turner as having a threatening, aggressive, violent, controlling, and possessive nature. In January 2008, 16-year-old Elliot Turner received a police harassment warning for relentlessly sending text messages and emails to his ex-girlfriend after she ended their relationship. With a sense of entitlement and no need to work thanks to his parents' financial support, Turner thrived on being the center of attention. He was skilled at manipulating people, including his parents, and his life revolved around parties, women, alcohol, and illegal substances. Turner had an inflated sense of self-importance, often carrying a hammer as a symbol of power and control. His friends believed he fancied himself a gangster, seeking to become the go-to person for help and admiration. He would often buy drinks for everyone at the bar, though his flashy new Mini Cooper was actually a gift from his grandmother. Turner struggled to maintain his tough guy image, frequently posting boastful, street-smart messages on social media, where he referred to himself as Scarface or God. He had no shortage of female admirers, but when he met Emily, he formed a strong attachment to her. She reinforced the image of himself as a successful person, an image he had worked hard to cultivate. As their relationship progressed, Turner began to exhibit controlling behavior more frequently. He even made a disturbing threat, telling Emily he would take her life in an emotional outburst. In a note to him a few months before her death, Emily wrote a list of 4 requests. Firstly, her love for him. Secondly, a plea to stop making threats on her life. Thirdly, a request to refrain from discussing his ex-girlfriends. And lastly, a desire for him to tone down his aggressive behavior, be cooler and less intimidating, as it was causing her fear. When Emily realized that Turner's controlling behavior had become unbearable, she knew she had to end the relationship. People like Turner, however, rarely accept rejection. On the evening of May 6, 2011, Emily went to a nightclub with her friends, unaware that Turner had been monitoring her Facebook messages. He discovered that she was seeing someone else, which enraged him. Turner stormed into the club and confronted Emily, sparking an argument. The situation escalated when Emily threw her drink in his face. Turner responded by harassing her verbally and making violent threats. He also criticized her outfit, claiming it was too provocative. Despite Emily's attempts to break free, Turner refused to accept that their relationship was over. Elliot ruined her evening, so she decided to leave, yet her ex-boyfriend followed her. His friends heard him say, "I will kill her. I will go to prison for it and still be a millionaire. I would do 10 years, it wouldn't bother me." Turner caught up with Emily, somehow persuading her to go to his house. He said he wanted to talk in a more relaxed atmosphere. Elliot Turner lived with his parents, perhaps that's why Emily went with him. Maybe she thought he would behave more calmly in the presence of his parents. Neighbors saw them go inside the house. Anita Turner, Elliot's mother, called the emergency service the next morning, saying Emily wouldn't wake up. At around 9 a.m., Anita received instructions from the operator on how to assist Emily while waiting for the ambulance to arrive. However, when the ambulance finally arrived, the paramedics were only able to pronounce Emily Longley dead. Anita, an Indonesian citizen, had moved to the UK to marry Lee Turner, and the couple had a son together. In hindsight, they had spoiled their son, which proved to be a mistake. During Anita's conversation with the emergency services operator, her voice lacked the emotional distress expected of a mother who had just discovered her son's girlfriend's lifeless body. Instead, she sounded eerily calm, as if the situation was normal. In New Zealand, thousands of miles from England, Emily's father, Mark, woke up at 2 a.m. to find multiple missed calls from his ex-wife Caroline and younger daughter Hannah. A voicemail from Hannah was also waiting, but Mark struggled to decipher what she was saying. Then he heard Caroline's scream in the background, followed by the devastating words, "Emily is dead." Mark refused to accept it. He immediately called his mother in England, and when she answered, her uncontrollable crying shattered his world. Moments later, a police officer took the phone and delivered the tragic news. "I'm sorry to tell you that your daughter Emily has passed away." Still in denial, Mark couldn't process the news, remembering how Emily had been sitting on his couch with a smile just a week prior. Flying to the UK, the grief-stricken father struggled to come to terms with the devastating news that his daughter was dead. But the harsh reality was that it wasn't just a terrible dream. The loss of their eldest daughter was a profoundly distressing experience for Emily's parents. The police informed them that Emily had passed away peacefully in her sleep, a revelation that was utterly incomprehensible. She was, after all, young and healthy. The police gathered some evidence, but the circumstances surrounding Emily's death remained shrouded in mystery. They had to patiently wait for the autopsy results to shed some light on the tragedy. Elliot Turner's parents, Anita and Lee, claimed to investigators that they had spent the entire night at home and hadn't heard a sound. However, Elliot's actions raised suspicions. He openly grieved Emily's loss by posting photos of the two of them together on his Facebook page. Since the police lacked concrete evidence to disprove Elliot's and his parents' story, they were unable to contest the claim that Emily had died mysteriously in her sleep. During the investigation of any death, determining the cause of death is the primary concern. Once investigators establish the cause of death, they understand the nature of the case and how to proceed with the investigation. Prior to receiving the autopsy results, investigators discovered a disturbing Facebook post made by Emily a few days before her death. On Thursday, May 5th, Emily wrote, "I have a stalker. I recently received a strange phone call where the caller claimed to know everything about me. When I asked how they obtained my number, they replied, 'I'll tell you when I see you.' They continued to ask me out and wouldn't stop calling. I eventually hung up on them." At the same time, investigators discovered that Emily had a public argument with Elliot Turner at a nightclub, witnessed by other patrons, before her death. Further inquiry revealed that Turner's friends knew he was possessive and controlling, constantly monitoring Emily's actions. They were aware that Turner had discovered Emily's secret meeting with another man and had repeatedly threatened to kill her. However, his friends downplayed these threats, thinking they were just a ploy to boost Turner's street credibility. The autopsy results did not provide a definitive cause of Emily's death, although experts suggested strangulation as a possible explanation, citing physical findings consistent with neck compression. Investigators suspected that one of the Turner family members might be involved in her death, leading them to install listening devices in the Turner household. Their goal was to uncover any potential secrets or miscommunications within the family. As it turned out, their suspicions were well-founded. Elliot Turner coached his mother on how to respond to police questioning, dictating what she should say. His father, Lee Turner, initially seemed to recognize the impropriety of his son's actions, but eventually surrendered to the will of his son and wife. During the trial, Elliot Turner confessed to causing Emily's death, claiming he acted in self-defense after a violent confrontation in his bedroom. He alleged that, during the altercation, he was forced to grab Emily by the neck, but denied strangling her. According to his account, he discovered her lifeless body in his bed the following morning. Elliot Turner confessed to threatening Emily and feeling upset and deceived on the evening preceding her death. According to him, Emily initiated a physical altercation, and in response he grabbed her by the neck to restrain her. He stated that he held her in this position for approximately 5 to 6 seconds before releasing her. Emily's father, Mark, reflected on the difficulty of losing his daughter. He explained that coping with death is never easy, and every anniversary is a painful reminder, especially birthdays, Christmas, and Easter, which were the last times he truly spent quality time with her. Mark painfully admitted that the hardest aspect for him was that he would never get to see the woman Emily could have become. He missed witnessing the life she was deprived of and the woman she was growing into, which he was extremely proud of. As her father, Mark acknowledged his bias, but genuinely believed that the world was a better place with Emily in it, and certainly more enjoyable. During the trial, Elliot Turner was depicted as a spoiled, affluent youngster whose parents attempted to help him evade punishment. The court learned that Elliot was given complete freedom in his family's luxurious home, where he would host wild parties for his friends from middle-class backgrounds. His father, Lee, described Elliot as unruly, and to minimize disturbances, gave him his own living space in the converted garage, allowing him to come and go as he pleased. It was in this room, equipped with a minibar, that Elliot strangled Emily to death on his bed. The police discovered search queries on his seized computers regarding death by strangulation and methods to avoid punishment for a crime. The primary motive was revealed to be jealousy, as the court heard testimony that Elliot discovered Emily had spent the night with another man while he was in custody. Elliot boasted that the jury would believe his twisted story that Emily had attacked him, and he acted in self-defense when he strangled her in a fit of jealousy. In letters from prison, he planned to sell the rights to his story, drive a new Range Rover, and move to Spain to live a fashionable life. However, the jury quickly shattered his illusions, finding him guilty. On May 22, 2012, the court sentenced Elliot Turner to life in prison with a minimum term of 16 years. The judge described him as a man of striking arrogance, stating that Emily was a lovely, kind, fun-loving girl whose light had been suddenly and needlessly extinguished by Elliot, who did not truly love her but saw her as a trophy to control. Elliot's parents, Anita and Lee Turner, were also on trial. They tried to cover up their son's crime, with Lee destroying Elliot's confession letter and Anita postponing the ambulance call to allow their son to cover his tracks. When asked why she did not call an ambulance, Anita Turner replied that she did not believe Emily was dead. Both Anita and Lee were found guilty of perverting the course of justice and sentenced to 27 months in prison. The judge said they chose to fight the case, showing little remorse, and the anguished tone of Lee's voice on the recorded tape revealed their guilt. After serving their sentence, they still live in the house where Emily Longley died. Emily's dad, Mark, broke down as he spoke about the verdicts, supported by his former wife Caroline and daughter Hannah. He said the revelations over the past 5 weeks have shocked and disgusted them, and that a man as evil as Turner could treat a gentle and loving girl like Emily so violently is beyond belief. They are proud that Emily had come halfway around the world to build a better life for herself, which Turner decided to end. Mark said there was a lot of talk about Turner's boasting, and that no one had taken his threat seriously until it was too late. He added that even Turner's mother did not take it seriously when he texted her to say he was going to break Emily's neck. Perhaps if someone had taken his threat seriously, Emily might be with them today. Mark hopes Turner suffers every day in prison for what he has done. In October 2020, it was reported that Elliot Turner was attacked by his cellmates in prison. This occurred after he displayed photos of Emily in his cell and bragged about receiving letters from female admirers. His boasting about his anticipated return to a luxurious lifestyle, complete with champagne, Bentley cars, and numerous women, angered his cellmates and prompted the attack. Despite this, Turner will be eligible to apply for early release from prison, and it is hoped that the parole board will exercise sound judgment and make a prudent decision regarding an individual who still shows no remorse for his actions. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Brittany Gregory. Brittany Gregory was born on April 1, 1988, in Brick Township, the youngest of 5 children in her family. When her parents divorced, she went to live with her father, but remained close to her siblings, particularly her sister Brianna, who was 4 years older. In school, Brittany was an outstanding student, and her teachers believed she had the potential to become a scholar. However, her unusual dream was to become a forensic scientist and study crime scene evidence. As the baby of the family, Brittany relished the extra attention she received. Her mother acknowledged that she was spoiled, but not vain or arrogant. For her 16th birthday in April, she held her mother to a promise to let her get her belly button pierced. Brittany was a big fan of pop star Britney Spears and had posters of her in her bedroom. She enjoyed watching cartoons, especially SpongeBob SquarePants. Her fascination with forensic science led her to watch TV shows about the subject, a profession she wanted to pursue. Brittany and her mother would often watch the same shows together and then call each other to discuss them. In 2004, Brittany, 16, and her sister, Brianna, 20, lived with their father, Joe Dunn, and his new girlfriend, Lori Peterson, in a small house close to their school. Located at the end of the street, the house was near a wooded area. At that time, Brittany had been dating John Fitzgerald, 18, for almost 2 years. He was a nice guy who had the approval of Brittany's family, and they had a very warm relationship, making them seem like the perfect couple. On Sunday, July 11, 2004, Brittany's mother, Deborah, and her sister Brianna drove to South Toms River, about 15 miles from Brittany's home, to visit her older brother and his wife, who had recently had a baby girl. That evening, around 8:30 p.m., Brittany called her mother on her cell phone, asking for a ride to her boyfriend John's house. Brittany sounded very upset, suggesting there might be trouble. Her mother explained that she was out of town and couldn't drive her, but said that her sister Brianna could arrive in about an hour. Brittany agreed to wait. About 45 minutes after Brittany phoned, Brianna was finally free to call her back, but Brittany didn't pick up. Brianna assumed that Brittany must be sleeping or that someone had taken her to John's, which is why she wasn't answering. However, when Brianna got back home the next morning, she was surprised to find that Brittany was nowhere to be found, although all of her belongings, including her phone, were still at the house. Brianna suspected that Brittany might have spent the night at her boyfriend's house, but it was unusual that she hadn't mentioned it to anyone and had left her cell phone behind. This wasn't typical of Brittany. Seeking answers, Brianna began calling all of Brittany's friends to see if anyone had information about her whereabouts, but none of them knew anything. After failing to reach her sister, Brianna decided to call John, who told her he last spoke to Brittany on Sunday morning, and they hadn't been in touch since. Lori Peterson, a family friend who lived with the girls, reported that she returned home around 10 p.m. on Sunday night, but Brittany was nowhere to be found. Brianna immediately sensed something was wrong and went to the police station to file a missing persons report. At first, the police were skeptical, thinking Brittany had likely run away or was out with friends. However, Brianna convinced them that she had already contacted all of Brittany's friends and her boyfriend, and none of them knew her whereabouts. Brianna was certain her sister wouldn't run away from home because she was an exemplary student who spent most of her time in the library. Brittany always notified her family before leaving the house, and all her belongings, including her money and phone, were left behind. After Brianna persuaded the police that her sister couldn't have disappeared on her own, they launched an investigation. The officers first searched Brittany's room at home, inspecting her belongings, including her purse with her phone, ID, and makeup. Although they didn't find any suspicious evidence, they still interviewed everyone living in the house and ruled out the possibility that someone close to Brittany was involved in her disappearance. The police launched a thorough search of the area surrounding the house, checking every nearby residence, scouring the property, and interviewing neighbors. Their goal was to find potential witnesses who might have seen or heard anything unusual. As they surveyed the scene, they noted the house's location at the end of the street, as well as the wooded area directly across the street. During their canvassing, none of the neighbors reported anything suspicious, except for one woman who recalled seeing Brittany walking down the street toward her own house late on Friday night, when it was already dark. Although this sighting occurred 2 days before Brittany's disappearance, investigators took note of it, recognizing it as a curious detail that didn't quite fit the image of the modest, bookish girl who rarely ventured out without her parents' permission. This raised questions. What had prompted Brittany to venture out so late, and was she actually allowed to do so? The police were eager to determine whether Brittany was as innocent and homebound as her sister had described her. Numerous police interviews with Brittany's family, neighbors, and teachers revealed that everyone spoke highly of her, with no one having anything bad to say. In her conversation with the police, Brianna mentioned that Brittany and her boyfriend, John, had a strained relationship lately with frequent arguing. On the day of her disappearance, the couple had another fight, leaving Brittany upset and wanting to visit John that evening to make amends. As a result of their investigation, the detectives decided to scrutinize John's alibi more thoroughly. They asked him to come to the police station to determine if he had seen Brittany on the day she vanished. John stated that his last phone conversation with Brittany was on Sunday morning when he was at the beach with friends. At that time, Brittany was upset that he had gone without her, and they had an argument. They hadn't spoken since then. John also revealed that he had ended their relationship a few days prior, but she couldn't accept it, even though she knew he was already dating another girl. John claimed he had no plans to meet Brittany that night and wasn't aware she was coming to his house. The reason for their breakup was a rumor that Brittany had kissed another guy at a party. Although John didn't see it himself, he decided to end the relationship and started dating another girl. John last saw Brittany on July 10th, the day before she disappeared, when she gave him a letter expressing her desire to reconcile. The detectives asked John for permission to review the letter Brittany had written, and he handed it over. In the letter, Brittany apologized for her behavior and for breaking John's heart. She also asked him to remain friends. John seemed genuinely concerned and worried that Brittany hadn't been found yet. The police had no evidence linking John to Brittany's disappearance, and after he passed a lie detector test, he was cleared of suspicion. However, John did tell detectives one important detail. He said that Brittany often came to his house through the woods behind her father's house. The story of Brittany's disappearance grew increasingly complex. Detectives started to speculate whether Brittany had attempted to reach John's house, about a mile from her father's house, by walking through the woods that night. Given the darkness, she could have easily gotten lost or encountered difficulties along the way. The police launched a search in the woods, focusing on the path that began near her house and which she likely took. Walking in the woods at night was frightening and perilous, raising the question of why a young girl like Brittany wasn't intimidated by the prospect. The forest search continued for 3 days, but yielded no results. Just when the investigation seemed stuck, a woman came forward who had been with her brother in a nearby park on the night Brittany vanished. The park was quiet and deserted, with no cars present, except for a distinctive Chevrolet pickup truck that drove by. The woman noticed the truck, even recalling its license plate. Following a thorough investigation, authorities discovered the truck was registered to 23-year-old Anthony Geiger. To establish a connection between Anthony and Brittany's disappearance, police delved into his past, revealing that he was the former boyfriend of Brittany's sister, Bobby Joe. Bobby Joe explained to detectives that she and Anthony split about a month prior due to his excessive jealousy and obsessive focus on her sister Brittany. She suspected Anthony, 23, harbored feelings for Brittany, which led her to ultimately terminate their relationship. Brittany's friends recalled that Anthony always had a strange way of looking at her and would frequently try to flirt with her. The most recent instance of this behavior was at lunch, where Anthony once again attempted to flirt with Brittany. As a result, detectives began to suspect Anthony of kidnapping Brittany and decided to bring him in for questioning. During the interrogation, Anthony claimed that he was not in the area where Brittany lived on the evening of July 11th. He stated that he didn't arrive until the next day, July 12th, by which time the police had already started searching for the missing girl. Anthony admitted to being on good terms with Brittany and seeing her at social gatherings, but maintained that they were just friends and that he never flirted with her. He also stated that he was aware that Brittany was too young for him and that his feelings towards her were purely platonic. Anthony testified that he spent the evening of July 11th at home with his new girlfriend, who corroborated his alibi. Despite this, investigators remained suspicious of Anthony, partly because his residence was near Brittany's home. Investigators went back to examine the letter Brittany had written to John and noticed disturbing signs that she was saying goodbye to her loved one. They began to fear that Brittany might be hurting herself after breaking off her relationship with her boyfriend. However, Brittany's parents rejected this version, believing that their daughter was smart and determined and would not give up her grand plans because of her breakup with her boyfriend. They believed Brittany was too in love with life. After the investigation stalled once more, the police turned to the media to seek help from the public in finding potential witnesses. To bolster their efforts, officers from other areas joined the investigation. Frustrated with waiting, Brittany's parents took an active role in the search, going door to door in the neighborhood, asking questions, although this approach yielded no results. The police refocused their attention on Brittany's home, where everything began. Even if she had indeed walked through the woods to meet her boyfriend, it was puzzling that she had left her phone behind in her room. Could someone have abducted her from the house itself? If so, was it someone she knew and trusted? During a meticulous search of the house, the police discovered a crucial piece of evidence in Brittany's room: her personal diary, containing a handwritten letter. The contents of this letter proved vital to the investigation, lifting the shroud of secrecy surrounding the family's relationships. Brittany wrote about her life in a letter, describing her relationships with friends and her boyfriend, as well as her schooling. She also shared details about her family, explaining that it was dysfunctional. Every Sunday, she visited her older brother, who was in jail. Her mother was a drug addict who had abandoned her when she was just 9 years old. Now Brittany lived with her father, with whom she was not close, and his girlfriends. Brittany admitted that she wasn't perfect and had done things she wasn't proud of. However, she was determined not to follow in her parents' footsteps and wanted to succeed in life. Her dream was to become a forensic scientist and help solve crimes. After reading the letter, the police widened their search to include Brittany's family, who had not previously been suspected. Detectives began investigating each family member and discovered that a male massage parlor was operating from Brittany's home. Lori Peterson, a friend of Brittany's father, was offering intimate services to different men every day, masquerading as a massage therapist. Neighbors were aware of this, and Lori herself didn't hide it, distributing business cards in the area. Neighbors reported that Brittany's father's house was a frequent gathering spot for suspicious individuals who would use illegal substances. This led the police to believe that the home environment was dysfunctional. Multiple men, mostly unknown to Lori, would visit her for her services, raising the possibility that one of them might have kidnapped Brittany from the house. Over 100 police officers worked to identify everyone who had visited Joe Dunn's house in the past month, a challenging task. A week after Brittany's disappearance on July 18th, the police announced they had arrested a murder suspect, stunning Brittany's family, who were still searching for her since her body had not been found. When Brittany's mother, Deborah, saw a picture of the suspect on television, she recognized him as her longtime friend, 38-year-old Jack Jr. He had been a close family friend for 20 years, attending all their family gatherings. In fact, his daughter was engaged to Brittany's brother, who was currently in prison. Deborah was stunned, unable to comprehend how Jack could be involved in Brittany's case, given his close relationship with their family and his children's friendship with Brittany. Despite this, they still held out hope that Brittany was alive. However, court records and interviews revealed that Jack was a hardened criminal with a history of threatening his neighbors throughout his adult life. He had been arrested over a dozen times in the last 10 years alone and had served time in state prison for theft and parole violations. His numerous crimes included breaking into cars, houses, and garden sheds, as well as drug use and sales. He had even threatened a man with a baseball bat and fought with police. Many of his offenses went unreported, as people were afraid of him. The last time Jack was sentenced, he received 5.5 years in prison and was released just a year before Brittany's disappearance. Although Brittany's parents suspected that Jack might steal from them to fund his drug habit, they never thought he was capable of harming their daughter. After Jack's arrest, the details of how the police connected him to Brittany's disappearance came to light. It started with a call to the police station. The caller reported that a few days prior he had met Jack, who had confided in him about back pain he was experiencing due to burying a girl's body in sandy soil. Jack boasted that the burial site would never be discovered and asked for advice on how deep to bury the body to avoid attracting animals. The police asked the informant to come to the station and suggested he wear a wire to meet with Jack. Jack questioned him about the crimes, including the murder. The informant agreed, and during the meeting, Jack revealed that he had buried the girl's body in a secluded area, claiming it would never be found. Although he admitted to committing the murder, he refrained from mentioning Brittany's name. In addition, Jack revealed his intention to eliminate someone who possessed too much knowledge, gesturing towards his friend Tommy, who was present in the car but didn't overhear the conversation. This led the detectives to believe that Tommy held crucial information that could crack the case, since Jack wouldn't have wanted to silence him otherwise. The detectives brought Tommy in for questioning at the station, but he refused to cooperate, claiming he knew nothing. However, the detectives were certain he was lying, and to prove their point, they played a recording of Jack stating he wanted to kill Tommy due to his knowledge. Realizing he was in danger, Tommy decided to collaborate with the authorities. According to Tommy, on the night Brittany vanished, he and Jack were driving around the neighborhood, smoking crack. They stopped in front of Brittany's house, and Jack decided to enter the house to discuss some matters with her father. When he entered, the house was empty except for Brittany. 5 minutes later, Jack returned to the car with Brittany, who sat in the back seat. Tommy was perplexed and asked what was happening, but Brittany remained silent, gazing downward. Jack informed him that he would take Tommy home. Tommy alleged that Jack drove him home, and when he exited the car, Brittany, who was sitting in the back, also got out and moved to the front passenger seat. Subsequently, Tommy and Jack drove away. The next day, when they met again, Jack didn't mention the previous day's events. They stopped at a car wash, where Jack gave his car an unusually thorough cleaning, washing both the interior and exterior. The car wash attendant joked about this, but Jack became angry, warning him to mind his own business or face the consequences. Tommy later explained that when he heard about Brittany's disappearance, he suspected Jack might be involved. He asked Jack directly what he had done with the girl. Jack became furious at the question, claiming he had simply driven her home and left. He rudely told Tommy not to ask again if he didn't want trouble. Tommy assumed that Jack had taken Brittany to the woods to rape her, believing that Jack had originally planned to use Lori's intimate services that night, but was thwarted when she wasn't at home. The detectives knew they had found their man when they arrived to arrest Jack. He was holding a can of gasoline, looking like he was about to set his car on fire, likely to destroy evidence. A search of the car revealed bloodstains, which forensic tests confirmed belonged to Brittany. Further investigation showed that Jack had visited a car wash after being with Brittany, and the police seized the vacuum cleaner he used. Criminologists found sand particles stuck together with Brittany's blood inside the vacuum, leaving no doubt about its origin. Although the police had gathered strong evidence, Jack refused to admit to kidnapping and murdering Brittany and remained silent about the case. The detectives interviewed Jack's acquaintances, and most of them believed he was capable of murder, describing him as a man who would stop at nothing. Despite being unemployed, Jack always seemed to have money. During the investigation, a patrol officer reported seeing a car parked on the side of the road near the woods on the night of Brittany's disappearance. The car belonged to Jack. At the time, the officer was unaware that Brittany was missing. When questioned, Jack claimed he was searching for his dog, which had run off into the woods. This information led the search for Brittany's body to focus on the area where the officer spotted Jack's car. Despite an extensive search involving police officers, K-9 units, helicopters, and volunteers, no body was found. Investigators theorized that Brittany, desperate for a ride to her boyfriend's house that night, asked Jack for a lift when he arrived at her home. Jack agreed to drive her, but instead, he took his friend Tommy home and then raped and killed Brittany, taking advantage of the situation. To prove this, however, the police needed to find her body. As the police attempted to question Jack and obtain a confession, a new witness emerged. A woman with a troubled past, who had previously been held hostage by Jack for months, called the police. She claimed that if Jack was indeed responsible for Brittany's murder, she might know where he had hidden her body. During her captivity, she had gained intimate knowledge of Jack's habits, frequent haunts, and secrets, which she was willing to share with the police. One day, a woman recounted how the suspect had shown her a location near a power line and told her it was an ideal spot to bury a body, as it was unlikely anyone would ever find it. Initially, the detectives were skeptical, but they began questioning her. She described the site as being in Lakewood, with sandy soil. This detail sparked a memory for the police, as an informant had previously mentioned that the suspect had complained about the difficulty of burying a body in sandy soil. The authorities decided to search the area the woman had described, which was just 3 miles from Brittany's home. Despite conducting an extensive search over several days, they found nothing. However, they persisted, motivated by the similarity between the sand found in the vacuum cleaner used by the suspect at the car wash and the soil in the area. Over 100 people searched the dense forest on the border of Monmouth and Ocean counties daily. Finally, on Tuesday, July 27, 2004, 15 days after Brittany was reported missing, her grave was discovered. 3 New Jersey K-9 officers, who had joined the search on the weekend, found her body. The naked body of the young girl was found in a hole, with a necklace bearing her name hanging around her neck. The detectives immediately confirmed it was Brittany's body. The medical examiner performed an autopsy but was unable to determine the exact cause of death due to the decomposition of the body over 2 weeks. The examiner could not rule out strangulation or suffocation, as Brittany had suffered both head trauma and strangulation. Brittany's body showed no clear signs of sexual assault, although the medical examiner did not exclude the possibility of rape having taken place. Jack ultimately decided to accept a plea bargain after consulting with his lawyer. Brittany's family also agreed to the deal to avoid a lengthy and draining trial. According to Jack, Brittany asked him to drop her off at her boyfriend's house, and he agreed. First, he drove Tommy home, and then he planned to take Brittany to her boyfriend's house. But before doing so, he pulled over to the side of the road and started smoking crack. This enraged Brittany, who began yelling at him and slapped him on the arm. This angered Jack, and he started punching Brittany. He admitted to punching her in the face and head at least twice because she tried to intervene and stop him from smoking. After Brittany was beaten, she started making gasping and gurgling sounds. Meanwhile, Jack was getting high as blood flowed from her nose and mouth. When he finally paid attention to her, Brittany had stopped breathing. He realized she was dead and decided to get rid of the body. However, the authorities didn't believe his story because the medical examiner found signs of strangulation on Brittany's body that Jack had left out. Additionally, he couldn't explain why Brittany was found without any clothes. The prosecution thought the crime was motivated by sexual intentions, and an Ocean County grand jury accused Jack of murder on February 9, 2005. Jack later admitted to purposely and knowingly causing serious bodily injury that resulted in death on October 18, 2005. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison without parole on January 13, 2006. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sierra Jugan. Sierra Jugan was a young woman who captivated everyone with her joyful personality. Her happy and humorous nature made her the center of attention wherever she went. She had a lively, cheeky personality that brought immense happiness to those around her. Even when she made mistakes, she had a special way of making her mom smile. As Sierra entered high school, she continued to showcase her adventurous spirit. She boldly took on new experiences, including playing volleyball. Whether on or off the court, she displayed a remarkable level of comfort and confidence. On July 19, 2016, the Jen family returned from their vacation and began unpacking. Sierra was looking forward to the fall semester at the University of Tu, where she planned to study abroad. Her mom wanted to discuss her plans with her, but Sierra, being an athletic person, was eager to try out her new bike. So whenever she had the time, she was keen to take a ride. Before leaving the house, Sierra told her mom that she was heading to her boyfriend Josh's house. Her mom acknowledged her plans and told her she would see her later, around 1:05 p.m. Sierra looked cute, with her hair tied up in a ponytail, wearing shorts and a tank top as she set out on her ride. Josh, Sierra's boyfriend, called her home phone because he was worried about her whereabouts. He had tried calling her phone several times, but it kept going straight to voicemail. When Josh asked Sierra's mom if she was home, she said no. Josh told Sierra's mom that Sierra had left his house around 7 p.m., and he hadn't seen or heard from her since then. Sierra's mom knew something was wrong because Sierra always answered her phone. Her first thought was to call Sierra's grandparents who lived nearby, but they said Sierra wasn't with them. Sierra's family and Josh started searching for her, worried about her safety. Sierra's mom quickly got in her car and started driving around, looking carefully at every possible place Sierra could be, including the sides of the road. Sierra's aunt, uncle, and cousin also joined the search, thinking Sierra might have been in an accident and got hit by a car. As time went by, worry grew. The possibility of Sierra being hurt, maybe with a broken leg, weighed heavily on their minds. Despite their relentless efforts and exhaustive search, they couldn't find any trace of Sierra. When Sierra's mom got home, she immediately took to social media, reaching out to Sierra's friends, desperately hoping someone had seen or heard from her. But to her dismay, there was complete silence. Hours passed, and still, there was no sign of Sierra. Filled with worry, Sierra's mom knew every minute counted and decided to call the police. Just an hour later, a concerned neighbor called Sierra's family saying County Road 6 was blocked off. With their hearts racing, Sierra's family rushed out to see what was happening. They were met by a chaotic scene surrounded by officers who refused to let them through. The officers stayed tight-lipped about Sierra, leaving her mom in a state of panic. She couldn't help but wonder if the police had found her missing daughter. The small-town police officers, seeking answers, decided to seek the FBI's assistance. They promised to deliver any information they could to Sierra's family as soon as possible. Understandably, the family found themselves unable to sleep, remaining wide awake and contemplating their next course of action. The following day, Sierra's mom and aunt took matters into their own hands, refusing to wait for answers. Her mom made a series of calls to hospitals, desperately searching for any signs of an unidentified female patient that might be Sierra. Despite call after call, they turned up nothing, leaving them feeling increasingly hopeless. A lead emerged from Detroit, Michigan, offering a glimmer of hope in the search for Sierra. A young woman, bearing a striking resemblance to her, had been admitted to a hospital with severe injuries, including numerous broken bones, after escaping from a moving vehicle with no identification. In an effort to confirm her identity, a nurse asked Sierra's family to describe any distinguishing marks on her body. Sierra's mom recalled a scar on her calf and a pierced belly button, which seemed to match the hospitalized girl's features, raising the family's hopes that they had finally found Sierra. Unfortunately, their hopes were soon dashed when they discovered that the girl in the hospital was not Sierra, leaving the family devastated and heartbroken after investing so much hope and anticipation in the possibility. Later that morning, the police visited Sierra's house to brief them on the previous night's events. One of the officers had found a trampled cornfield near where he'd parked his car and approached the area. He noticed signs of a struggle and a motorcycle track inside the cornfield, Not wanting to disturb any potential evidence, he backed away without touching anything. As he retreated, he caught a glimpse of a reflection: Sierra's purple bike. Further investigation uncovered several items at the scene: a pair of men's sunglasses, a pair of women's sunglasses, a blood-stained sock, and a screwdriver. Based on these discoveries, the police concluded that Sierra was likely abducted from that location. During the investigation, detectives thoroughly questioned Sierra's friends and family to gather information about her boyfriend Josh. They learned that Sierra and Josh had been inseparable since they were 7 years old, and their friendship developed into a romantic relationship in their first year of high school. The couple was known for their energetic and carefree nature, sharing a passion for skiing, among other things. After high school, Sierra went to the University of Toledo, while Josh enrolled at Bowling Green, but despite the physical distance, their commitment to each other remained strong. They often talked about getting married in the future, although Sierra emphasized her priority on completing her education before settling down, showcasing her academic dedication. Detectives investigating the case found that Sierra had visited Josh's house in the early afternoon on July 19th. According to the gathered information, Sierra decided to leave Josh's house and head home around 6:30 p.m. Because he was worried about her safety, Josh joined Sierra on her ride home, riding alongside her on his motorcycle. After a few miles, Sierra told Josh to turn back and go home, wanting to ride her bike alone and prove her independence. Josh reluctantly agreed, and they parted ways, with Josh heading back on his motorcycle and Sierra continuing her ride. During the investigation, detectives discovered motorcycle tracks in the nearby corn stalks, not far from Sierra's bike. This raised the question of whether these tracks belonged to Josh's motorcycle, and detectives couldn't ignore the possible connection. They began a thorough investigation to determine if there was any evidence linking Josh to the scene where Sierra went missing. As a result, detectives set up a command post to gather all relevant clues about Sierra's disappearance. A promising lead emerged quickly. A local resident came forward, saying that on July 14th, while driving, he saw a motorcycle helmet on the side of the road. He asked his son to retrieve it and put it in their truck. Later, after learning about Sierra's disappearance, he examined the helmet more closely and found red stains, which he suspected were blood. The helmet was discovered near the cornfield where Sierra's bike was found. The detectives asked Josh about his helmet, and to their relief, he produced it, confirming he had it with him. Furthermore, they verified that Josh had returned home after the interview with his parents, ruling him out as a suspect due to his solid alibi. Despite being visibly shaken, Josh was not suspected by Sierra's family in connection with her disappearance. The detectives focused on identifying the owner of a blood-stained motorcycle helmet found on the roadside. Recognizing the significance of DNA evidence, they sent the helmet to the crime lab for testing, awaiting the results with anticipation, hoping for a breakthrough in their investigation. Community unites in search for Sierra, organizing parties to scour every area for clues. Townspeople work together, fueled by a deep sense of unity, to bring her home safely. Hundreds gather at a candlelight vigil, sending thoughts and prayers for her return. 2 days after Sierra vanished, the police got a tip about a suspicious van speeding through the area where she was last seen. People thought she might have been kidnapped and forced into sex trafficking. The tipster gave the police the van's license plate number. The police interviewed the van's owner, but it turned out the van had nothing to do with Sierra's disappearance. The owner explained that he sped up because another car suddenly appeared from behind, which might have been a family member looking for Sierra, and he panicked. By the 48-hour mark, the investigation had turned up no leads on Sierra's whereabouts. As time goes on, her family is struggling to stay hopeful. With each passing day, the chances of finding her alive get smaller and smaller. Despite trying to stay positive, the harsh reality of the situation is getting harder to ignore. The police went from door to door searching for Sierra, and their investigation eventually took them to a farm near where her bike was found. The farm, which covered an acre of land, had several buildings including a small house, a trailer, and a large barn. The owner of the property was James Worley. When the police arrived at the farm, they started talking to James Worley. They asked him about the day Sierra went missing, hoping he could tell them something about her disappearance. But what James said shocked them. He told them he had been out riding his motorcycle that day, but it broke down, and he lost some things along the way, including a screwdriver and his helmet. This was surprising because those were the same items found at the scene where Sierra was taken. By saying this, James had unintentionally put himself at the scene of the crime, which made the detectives very suspicious of him and his connection to Sierra's disappearance. The police were determined to delve deeper into their investigation, and they questioned James Worley. During the questioning, they noticed something that caught their attention: scratches on his face. It was clear that he had been involved in a struggle, and this discovery only increased their suspicions about him, raising more questions. The detectives wondered if these scratches were the result of a confrontation with the missing girl, Sierra. After questioning James Worley about Sierra's disappearance, the detectives returned to the police station. They decided to conduct a background check on him, hoping to uncover relevant information as they looked into his past. But what they discovered sent chills down their spines. James Worley had a dark criminal history, including a previous attempt to abduct a young woman 26 years earlier on July 4, 1989. The woman's name was Robin Garter. On July 4, 1989, 26-year-old Robin Garter was getting ready to attend a neighborhood picnic. While her mother was busy preparing potato salad and making final arrangements for the event, Robin decided to squeeze in a bike ride beforehand. However, she had forgotten to bring water and was now struggling with the intense heat. As she considered turning back home to quench her thirst, Robin heard the sound of a car approaching from behind. Robin thought that after the vehicle passed her, she would head back home. But before she could react, the car crashed into her bike, sending her flying into a nearby ditch. She was stunned and disoriented. The driver stopped and got out, looking concerned and trying to figure out what had happened. But then things took a dark turn. The person who had hit her suddenly revealed sinister intentions. Without warning, he hit her hard on the back of the head. As she struggled to understand what was happening, the attacker held a screwdriver to her throat, threatening to kill her in a menacing tone. He ordered her to get up and get into his car right away. The man forced Robin into his car at screwdriver point, trying to handcuff her once she was inside. He managed to cuff one wrist, but Robin fought back fiercely, preventing him from cuffing the other. She screamed for help at the top of her lungs, but her cries were drowned out by the empty cornfields, with no one around to hear her. Robin's fierce resistance against her attacker left her on the brink of unconsciousness multiple times, but she refused to give up. Just as the silence was becoming unsettling, she picked up the faint sound of a motorcycle in the distance. As she strained her eyes, she saw it approaching the car where her captor was. Realizing this might be her only chance to escape, Robin waved her arms wildly to get the rider's attention. Luckily, the rider noticed her distress signals and brought the motorcycle to a stop. In a desperate bid for help, Robin explained that the man was trying to kill her. Without hesitation, she seized the opportunity and quickly climbed onto the back of the motorcycle, leaving her captor and the car behind. The motorcycle rider drove Robin home, where she collapsed. Robin's mother called the police and an ambulance, and Robin was rushed to the hospital for medical treatment. The motorcyclist, determined to help the authorities, led the police back to the scene of the incident. To their surprise, they found James Worley still present, waiting with his car. When questioned, James was fully cooperative and provided identification to prove who he was. However, his version of events differed significantly from initial assumptions. James strongly denied any intention of kidnapping Robin. According to his account, Robin was riding her bike erratically, swerving into the road, making it impossible for him to avoid hitting her. James claimed that after the accident, Robin became hysterical, and he restrained her with handcuffs not to harm her, but to secure her to the steering wheel of his truck while he sought help. He insisted his actions were driven by genuine concern for Robin's well-being. James Worley was arrested in 1989 for trying to abduct Robin. He was found guilty of abduction and sentenced to 6 to 10 years in the state prison in Mansfield, Ohio. Due to good behavior, he was released 3 years later. When Robin found out that James was released, she was terrified. The fear of James potentially striking again weighed heavily on her mind. With information about James Worley's criminal history in hand, the police obtained a search warrant and went to his home. When they arrived, they started searching the house, which James shared with his mother. At first, everything seemed normal. Next, they turned their attention to the large backyard, methodically searching the outdoor area. The officers then discovered a barn located in the corner of the yard, which sparked their curiosity. They approached the structure cautiously. Inside the barn, the police found stacks of hay bales. They searched the barn carefully, looking for any evidence that might connect James to Cece's disappearance. The detectives examined every nook and cranny, checking each bale of hay for hidden items or clues. As they removed the bales of hay from James Worley's barn, the detectives noticed a small green crate in the corner. They approached it cautiously and opened it, finding bags of underwear, stockings, and tube tops. Each item was neatly labeled and sealed in a plastic Ziploc bag. As the detectives searched through the items, they were shocked to see a pair of purple panties with what looked like bloodstains. This discovery filled them with a sense of dread, and they wondered what other disturbing things they might find in their search of James Worley's barn. The detectives quickly spotted a piece of plywood on the ground and recognized its potential importance. They carefully lifted the plywood, exposing a small freezer buried in the barn. When they opened the freezer, they were met with a strong, unpleasant smell, similar to bleach, which heightened their suspicions. As they continued their investigation, they found other disturbing objects hidden behind hay bales, including a stained air mattress that hinted at a dark history. The presence of zip ties, duct tape, handcuffs, and keys added to their concerns, as these items are commonly used in abductions and other criminal activities. The detectives decided to send all the items taken from the property for DNA testing. Worley attempted to explain the items as part of a porn business he claimed to be planning, but the evidence against him was too strong to ignore. The combination of the disturbing discoveries at the crime scene and the incriminating items led to James's arrest for Sierra's murder. Sierra's family was stunned to learn that her abductor was someone who lived far away from her home. This news sparked a million questions in her mind, with the most pressing one being where she was. The detectives launched a thorough investigation of James's property, meticulously searching every inch of it and leaving no stone unturned. They brought in cadaver dogs to help detect any potential remains. The detectives focused on a pond on the property, recognizing its potential significance. They carefully drained it to uncover any evidence hidden beneath the water's surface. They also inspected the insulation in the front of the attic. As the investigation progressed, they extended their search to the neighboring properties, considering the possibility that evidence might have been dispersed beyond James's property. They pursued leads in all directions, diligence and thoroughness guiding their efforts. A farmer was walking through his vast field when he received a call. As he walked, he noticed a peculiar area of corn that was matted down and decided to take a closer look. When he approached the spot, he saw a nearby mound of dirt, which immediately made him think it could be a grave. This worried him even more because of the recent search for Sierra. With this on his mind, he quickly called the police, telling them about his suspicions and giving them the exact location. Responding promptly to the farmer's distress call, the police arrived at the scene. They noticed a fresh pile of dirt, which fueled their suspicion that it could be a grave. Taking the situation seriously, they began processing the area carefully to avoid disturbing any potential evidence. The officers examined every inch of the scene, hoping to find clues about Sierra's whereabouts. However, despite their thorough efforts, their search yielded no results. The detectives then searched the adjoining farms for Sierra, using drones and helicopters to cover a larger area and increase their chances of locating her. During their search, they found another mound of dirt with freshly matted corn. Their trained dogs detected the scent of decomposition, suggesting a potential crime scene. As the crime scene investigators dug, they made a grim discovery. They found human remains. Based on the evidence, it was believed to be Sierra's body. Tragically, her hands were bound behind her back, and her feet were tied to the handcuffs. Further examination revealed that an object was lodged in her mouth, restricting her airway, which ultimately led to her death. Later that night, the Sierra family received a devastating call they had been fearing. The police had found Sierra's lifeless body. The news was met with an overwhelming outpouring of grief as the entire family broke down in tears. The sorrow felt by each family member was palpable, and the weight of the moment was crushing. A month after Sierra's tragic abduction and murder, James Worley was charged with 19 counts, including kidnapping and aggravated murder. 2 years later, Worley's trial began. Despite the overwhelming evidence against him, he pleaded not guilty to all charges. Over 8 intense days, the prosecution presented a gripping story that captivated the jury and spectators alike. After deliberating for 6 hours, the jury found Worley guilty on all counts related to Sierra's murder. The severity of the crime led to Worley being sentenced to death. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Mike Williams. Mike Williams was born on October 16, 1969, in Bradfordville, north of Tallahassee. He was the son of a bus driver and a kindergarten teacher. Family and friends called him Mike. Even though the family didn't have much money and Mike, along with his older brother, grew up living in a trailer, those were happy times. The parents cared about their son's future, and instead of building a house, they set aside money for the education of both boys, who themselves worked part-time at night in supermarkets. Mike enrolled in North Florida Christian High School, where he excelled. He became student council president, played soccer, and was active in the Key Club. At the age of 15, Mike started duck hunting as a hobby and met Denise Merrill. Denise was a cheerleader and council secretary, and they began dating. Friends thought they were a great couple. While still in high school, Mike became best friends with Brian Winchester, whom Denise had introduced him to. Brian later had a friend, Katie Thomas, and the two couples remained friends for the rest of Mike's life. After high school, Mike and Denise attended Florida State University, where they both majored in political science and urban planning. The lovers graduated together. Denise became a public accountant, and Mike became a real estate appraiser. Mike proved himself to be a dedicated and hard-working individual, consistently putting in 15-hour days, which led to rapid success in his career. In 1994, he married Denise, and around the same time, his friend Brian married Kathy. The four of them maintained a close and supportive relationship. Mike loved his wife deeply and was determined to provide for their family to the best of his ability. He had boundless energy and was a high achiever. By the age of 31, Mike Williams had achieved significant success as a real estate appraiser, earning a substantial annual income of nearly $200,000. This allowed the couple to purchase a comfortable home in an upscale neighborhood on the east side of town, and in 1999, they welcomed a daughter into their family. Although Mike was prudent, he had a tendency to engage in risky activities, which prompted his friends to warn Denise about them. To ensure his family's financial security, Mike sought the advice of his trusted friend Brian, who worked as an insurance agent. Brian sold Mike 2 life insurance policies, one worth $250,000 and another worth $500, providing financial protection for his loved ones in the event of an unforeseen disaster. In 2000, Mike's father died, which had a profound impact on Mike. To ensure his family's financial security, Mike turned to his friend Brian for help. Brian assisted Mike in getting a $1 million life insurance policy, adding to an existing policy and bringing the total coverage to nearly $2 million, just 6 months before Mike vanished. On December 16, 2000, their 6th wedding anniversary, Mike woke up early to go duck hunting on Lake Seminole, a large reservoir connected to the Apalachicola River. Denise and their daughter stayed at home, expecting Mike to return that day so they could celebrate their anniversary with a planned night out in Apalachicola, a small town on the bayou. However, Mike didn't come back, prompting Denise to become worried and call her father. Her father then contacted Mike's best friend, Brian Winchester. Brian and his father drove to Lake Seminole, where they found Mike's Ford Bronco parked near the boat dock, but Mike was missing. The search for Mike began, and after a few hours, a helicopter pilot located the boat drifting approximately 225 feet away from the boat ramp. Notably, Mike's shotgun was still in its case on board, indicating that he was never able to use it. This discovery led to a shift in the operation from a rescue mission to a recovery effort. Locals familiar with the area informed the search team that the location was previously an orchard, known as Stump Field, due to the numerous stumps both above and below the water level, which made navigating motorized boats through the area hazardous. The search team formulated a theory about what might have happened to Mike. He might have collided with a stump while operating his boat, fallen into the water, and become trapped, with his boots filling with water and ultimately causing him to drown. Several agencies, including a dive team from Montgomery, Alabama, and the Jackson County Sheriff's Office, participated in the search for Mike. Although they made an extensive and systematic effort, they did not find any signs of him. After a week, the search operation shifted its focus to a body recovery effort. Search teams used probe poles to scan the lake bottom and brought in dogs to assist. 10 days into the search, volunteers found a camouflage-patterned hunting hat, but it could not be confirmed as belonging to Mike. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Agency suggested that Mike might have been attacked by alligators, which could explain why his body was never found, given the lake's known alligator population. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement did not find any evidence of a violent death and supported this theory. The search was finally called off after 5 weeks. The day after the authorities gave up searching for Mike, Denise put together a memorial service to pay tribute to him. While it appeared to everyone that Denise had come to terms with losing her husband, Mike's mother was still grappling with the loss. 6 months down the line, in June 2001, a fisherman stumbled upon a sinister find: a pair of boots bobbing on the lake's surface. This prompted a team of divers to scour the lake, and they fished out a lightweight hunting jacket and flashlight from the depths. When they examined the jacket, they found a hunting license with Mike Williams' name and signature tucked away in one of its pockets. The discovery of the hunting jacket and boots raised many questions about Mike Williams' disappearance. The fact that neither item showed signs of an alligator attack and appeared to have been recently placed in the water rather than having been there for 6 months was suspicious. The boots, for example, were not slimy, and the flashlight still worked. Despite these inconsistencies, a week later, Denise's attorney requested that the court declare Mike Williams dead, citing the discovery of his belongings as evidence. The attorney suggested that alligators and other aquatic life had likely consumed his body whole. The court granted the motion, and the death certificate was issued, stating that Mike died on December 16, 2000, due to accidental drowning while duck hunting on Lake Seminole. However, Cheryl Williams, Mike's mother, refused to accept this conclusion and continued to search for her son. Her efforts caused tension with her former sister-in-law, Denise, who demanded that she stop searching and accept reality. Cheryl's persistence eventually led to a strained relationship between the two women, and Denise followed through on her threat. Undeterred, Cheryl spent the next 3 years fighting to have Mike's disappearance investigated. She made numerous phone calls, posted signs, wrote to the governor, compiled a book of evidence, and contacted reporters. Her persistence finally paid off when she convinced an alligator expert, Matthew Oresco, to get involved. Oresco explained that alligators don't feed during the cold winter months, and that there would always be forensic evidence left behind after an alligator kill. After 3 years, Cheryl Williams finally persuaded law enforcement to abandon the alligator attack theory and launch an official investigation into her son Mike's disappearance. The case was reopened based on newly uncovered facts about alligators' eating habits and evidence gathered from interviews and official data. Former investigator Ronnie Austin revealed that the general consensus among law enforcement agencies was that Mike's death was not accidental. Initially, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Agency took charge of the case, as Mike was considered a missing hunter. They spent 735 hours searching a 10-acre section of the lake for his body, but neglected to explore other possibilities. Subsequent investigations involved interviewing all those involved in the search, including police officer David Arnett, who was present at the scene. He pointed out several suspicious circumstances. Mike rarely hunted alone. His truck was found in an undeveloped area, and the severe storm that night should have pushed the boat to the east shore, yet it was found on the west shore. Furthermore, the boat's motor was not running, despite being full of gasoline. If Mike had fallen out of the boat while driving, it would have continued to float in circles until it ran out of gas. Unfortunately, law enforcement realized too late that they were not dealing with a simple drowning. By then, the crime scene had already been compromised by numerous volunteers and searchers. A car that could have been a vital clue was taken by the family without proper verification, and potential witnesses were overlooked. Denise Williams and Brian Winchester aroused the suspicion of investigators due to their sudden union. The fact that Winchester had divorced his wife Kathy and married Denise raised eyebrows. Further investigation revealed that Denise had received a substantial financial gain of nearly $2 million from her late husband's life insurance policy. Detectives discovered that Winchester was the one who had sold the policy to Mike. It was also peculiar that Denise, as Mike's wife, showed little interest in the investigation and actively tried to hinder Cheryl's efforts, even going so far as to forbid the grandmother from communicating with her granddaughter. When the newlywed couple was brought in for questioning, their statements failed to shed new light on the case. Brian provided an alibi, stating that he was 60 miles from the lake and at home in bed at the time of Mike's disappearance, which his ex-wife Kathy could corroborate. He claimed that he had intended to go hunting with his father-in-law that morning, but overslept. Denise's interrogation also yielded no new leads. In 2008, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement revealed that Mike's disappearance was not accidental, and they suspect he was a victim of a crime. However, due to the lack of sufficient evidence, they are unable to bring charges. Despite this, Cheryl Williams persisted, and her efforts led to the Discovery Cable Channel featuring a story on Mike's disappearance and the subsequent investigations. By that time, Cheryl had become disenchanted with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, convinced that they were either incapable or uninterested in resolving the case. Starting in 2012, Mike's mother, Cheryl, began a campaign to push for a new investigator or special prosecutor in Mike's case. Over 9 years, she wrote a staggering 2,600 letters to Governor Rick Scott, pleading her case. Meanwhile, in 2012, Denise discovered that Brian was cheating on her, and they broke up. The following year, she filed for divorce. As the divorce proceedings dragged on, an appraisal of their former family home was scheduled, which would finally free them from their property disputes. This event marked a turning point in Mike's case. The breakup was acrimonious, with Brian refusing to accept the divorce and Denise refusing to continue the relationship. Their constant fighting was further complicated by the Williams investigation, which seemed to be mocking them. Brian continued to call Denise, but she stopped taking his calls. The stress was taking a toll on him. On August 5, 2016, the day of the scheduled real estate appraisal, Denise left her home to drive to her job at Florida State University. As she chatted with her sister on the phone, she noticed someone climbing into the back seat of her car. To her shock, it was Winchester. Brian, who had been hiding in the back seat, pressed a loaded gun against Denise's ribs and ordered her to drive straight ahead. He claimed he was forced to take this drastic measure because she had stopped answering his calls. Denise attempted to placate Brian by agreeing with everything he said and promising to give him a chance to salvage their marriage. Naively, Brian believed her. Denise reassured him that she wouldn't report the incident to the police, and Brian exited the car, taking with him the brown sheet, plastic sheeting, bleach sprayer, and tools. It became evident that Denise had narrowly escaped death. Denise promptly called emergency services, and Brian was swiftly arrested and charged with kidnapping, a first-degree felony in Florida carrying a maximum penalty of life imprisonment. He was also charged with domestic violence and armed burglary. The court ruled to detain Brian without bail. Cheryl Williams, hopeful that this development would shed light on her son's disappearance case, expressed optimism. Denise told the New York Daily News that she thought Brian was motivated by their wealth and prayed that he would reveal the truth. In a surprising turn of events, Brian cooperated, negotiating a lenient deal with the prosecutor and avoiding a life sentence. Brian began his confession by saying that initially, their marriage was going well, but he was a bad husband. He discovered a note in his first wife Kathy's purse, revealing her infidelity, and he sought revenge. They regularly socialized with Denise and Mike, going to bars and concerts together. Brian had known Denise since high school, but it wasn't until his girlfriend Kathy cheated on him that he started viewing Denise in a romantic light. The affair between Brian and Denise started in October 1997. What began as a drunken one-night stand at a rock concert soon turned into frequent secret trysts. They would meet at hotels during the workday whenever possible. Brian didn't want to divorce Kathy, but Denise made it clear she wouldn't leave her husband. She cared deeply about public opinion and didn't want to risk losing custody of her daughter. Over time, their affair evolved beyond casual sex. Denise and Brian saw themselves as a couple, exchanging gifts and love letters. It became apparent they couldn't continue like this. They couldn't bear to be apart. But divorce was off the table for Denise. Her reputation as a pious person had to remain intact. Then, Mike nearly died in a hunting accident, and Brian saved his life. Denise saw an opportunity to escape her predicament. After making a deal with the prosecutor, Brian will disclose that the year 2000 sparked discussions about Mike and Kathy's death. According to Brian, Denise had wanted to deflect responsibility, placing the blame solely on him and not herself. She had preferred a scenario in which their deaths would be viewed as an accident rather than a murder, thereby allowing her to convince herself that their fate was in God's hands, which would enable her to live with the consequences. After considering various options, Brian and Denise chose to stage a boating accident. They planned the murder to coincide with the maximum payout on Mike's life insurance policy, which was set to expire at the end of December 2000. The plan was in place. Brian invited Mike on a hunting trip, claiming he'd found an ideal spot on Lake Semol's shores. Mike thought he'd be back home by noon to celebrate his anniversary with his wife. Brian told him to bring his wading boots, as they were essential for the trip. Unbeknownst to Mike, Brian had a sinister motive. If he fell overboard wearing wading boots, he'd supposedly drown quickly. The plan was to make Mike's death appear as an accidental drowning. Once they were in the water, Brian pushed Mike out of the boat. However, Mike grabbed onto nearby stumps and started wading through the water towards the shore. Brian panicked, not knowing how to react. Mike began shouting for help, and Brian, desperate and confused, grabbed a shotgun and shot Mike in the head without thinking of the consequences. Brian's plan had unraveled, and he had to cover his tracks. Time was running out. He should have been home by now, getting ready to go hunting with his father-in-law. Since no one knew he was at the lake with Mike, Brian decided to drive home and pretend he'd overslept. He hoped Kathy would still be asleep. Brian entered the house as quietly as possible. Kathy was asleep, and his phone was on the floor. He went to bed, then called his father-in-law to apologize. Next, Brian created an alibi for himself before hiding the body. Denise was unaware that Brian had shot Mike in the head and buried him. Brian tried to confess, but Denise didn't want to hear it. For her, it was enough that her husband was gone. She preferred to believe that God had prevented Mike from swimming out and let him drown, as Brian had suggested. They promised each other to keep the secret. Denise and Brian rationalized the killing, claiming that Mike's presence made it impossible for them to live together. They downplayed the role of money, saying it was just an added bonus. Brian testified in court that investigators had discovered he had planted a hat, boots, flashlight, and license as part of a ruse. His aim was twofold. First, to deter searchers from abandoning the lake, and later, to provide justification for declaring Mike dead, thereby allowing Denise to collect insurance benefits. Impressively, they managed to expedite the typically 5-year recognition process to just 7 months, securing not only Social Security benefits, but also other advantages. As a result, Denise received approximately $2 million on May 8, 2018. Denise Williams faced charges of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and being an accessory to a felony, all of which carried a life sentence. Despite pleading not guilty to all 3 charges, Denise was sentenced to life imprisonment in February 2019. 5 months later, Mike and Denise's daughter Ansley inherited all of her late father's assets and the insurance money that had been owed to Denise. Denise Williams appealed her conviction and life sentence. Her attorney argued before Florida's First District Court of Appeal that there was no evidence to implicate her in the actual murder. In November 2020, the murder conviction was overturned, although the 30-year sentence for conspiracy to commit murder was upheld. Denise is currently being held at the Florida Women's Reception Center and will be 78 years old upon her release. Brian Winchester is currently serving the remainder of his sentence at Madison Correctional Institute in Florida, with a scheduled release date of July 30th, 2036, at which point he will be 67 years old. Ansley, the daughter of Mike and Denise, firmly believes her mother is innocent and attributes responsibility to Brian Winchester. While refusing to discuss the case or her personal life with the media, Ansley remains estranged from her uncle, Nick, and grandmother, Cheryl, who are distressed by their inability to connect with her. Cheryl deeply regrets having lost both her son and her granddaughter. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Wang Nan. Wang Nan, born in 1987 in Nanjing, China, a major city and former capital, Wang Nan grew up in a relatively affluent family. Her parents provided her with the best possible education and encouraged her to develop her talents. After completing her secondary education, Wang Nan enrolled in a prestigious university where she studied business and finance and also learned several foreign languages. Upon graduation, she landed a job at a large travel agency where she quickly proved herself to be a valuable, responsible, and motivated employee. Her career advanced rapidly, and she was soon sent to Thailand to head a new branch and oversee its development. Wang Nan worked as a top manager for several years before deciding to leave the agency to start her own business. She opened a Chinese restaurant in Bangkok, which she managed successfully, and it eventually grew into a small but popular chain. Wang Nan was a thriving young entrepreneur who had devoted her life to her career. With her constant business engagements, she barely had time for socializing or dating, and her loneliness became a normal part of her life. At almost 30 years old, Wang Nan was well established in Thailand, having lived there for a while and become proficient in the language. However, she strived for further improvement, taking additional courses to learn Thai at a training center. There, she met a young man named Yu Xiaodong, who initially stared at her before introducing himself in his native language. They exchanged brief conversations, and he inquired about her reason for studying the language. Wang Nan replied that it was for business purposes, and Yu Xiaodong proposed exchanging business cards to potentially meet up Sunday. Although Wang Nan was not interested in continuing the conversation, she still politely gave him her business card. Yu Xiaodong also gave Wang Nan his own business card, which said that he worked in the import-export industry in Bangkok. Not very impressed, Wang Nan put the business card in her wallet and forgot about it. Yu Xiaodong was the only one who showed genuine interest in Wang Nan, and he wasted no time in calling her the very next day. However, she was preoccupied with work and couldn't spare even a few minutes to talk, so she declined his invitation to meet for coffee. A few days later, Yu Xiaodong asked her out again, but Wang Nan turned him down once more, citing her busy schedule and preparations for an upcoming business conference where she hoped to expand her professional network. Undeterred, Yu Xiaodong showed up at the conference with a stunning bouquet of flowers and waited for Wang Nan to become available. When she was free, he approached her and asked her out once more. This time, Wang Nan was charmed by his persistence, which was a new experience for her. No one had ever pursued her so relentlessly before, so she agreed to meet him for dinner. As it turned out, Yu Xiaodong's interest in Wang Nan was more than just a passing infatuation. He was completely smitten. He showered her with attention, surprise gifts, and romantic gestures, including sending flowers to her doorstep every morning with sweet notes attached. He also called her at least twice a day to wish her good morning and good night. Wang Nan had mixed emotions about the situation. While she was irritated by Yu Xiaodong's all-consuming infatuation, she was also flattered that someone was making such an effort to win her heart. As a result, she found herself unexpectedly entering into a romantic relationship. Yu Xiaodong went out of his way to woo her, not only romantically but also by trying to be perfect in every aspect of their relationship. He shared her interests and opinions, learned to cook her favorite meals, and planned exciting activities for them to enjoy together. He was also eager to help her with her work and household chores at a moment's notice. Wang Nan was over the moon with happiness, feeling as though she was living in a fairy tale. Yu Xiaodong's behavior, however, was moving at a breakneck pace. Despite having only been together for a few months, he was already making plans for their wedding and discussing potential names for their future children. This made Wang Nan uncomfortable, but Yu Xiaodong would counter by pointing out that they were both in their 30s and that it was time for them to start thinking about building a family. That night, Yu Xiaodong wrote a heartfelt letter to Wang Nan, expressing his deep affection and commitment to being a good husband and father. The next morning, he arrived at her doorstep with a bouquet of flowers, reiterating his seriousness about marrying her. Wang Nan jokingly mentioned that the courthouse wouldn't open for another hour and a half, but Yu Xiaodong suggested they go there immediately. To her surprise, the courthouse was open, and the officer responsible for registering marriages was already at his desk, ready to formalize their union. Yu Xiaodong had secretly arranged for a hasty marriage ceremony to take place early in the morning. The whole event was unusual and lacking in formality. There were no guests, no exchange of rings, no wedding dress or veil, and no commemorative photographs. Wang Nan couldn't shake the feeling that the whole thing wasn't really happening, especially since she hadn't even introduced her new husband to her mother, with whom she was extremely close. Before she knew it, she was holding a marriage certificate in her hand, and her newlywed husband was standing beside her, beaming with satisfaction. Wang Nan's marriage was troubled from the start. She had second thoughts about marrying Yu Xiaodong almost immediately after the wedding. Initially, she had hoped he would be a reliable partner, a man she could depend on. Unfortunately, her expectations were not met, and her new husband's true nature soon revealed itself. Yu Xiaodong spent most of his time at home playing video games, using his wife's money without contributing to their household expenses. Whenever his wife asked him why he wasn't working, he claimed his business was slow due to seasonal fluctuations and that he was just taking a break. However, her suspicions grew as time passed, and she decided to investigate his business. Her findings shocked her. His supposedly successful import-export company existed only on paper and business cards. One man was horrified, realizing too late that she should have had a prenuptial agreement. Now, her husband could freely spend her earnings, and if they divorced, he would claim her assets. During a tense conversation, Yu Xiaodong broke down in tears, promising to turn his life around and find a good job. However, it soon became apparent that he had no intention of looking for work and was content to rely on his wife's support. Yu Xiaodong, a grown man, consistently acted like a child. He spent most of his time playing computer games and expected his wife, Wan Nan, to pay for his personal expenses whenever he helped out around the house or assisted her at the restaurant. Wan Nan eventually had enough and told him she would no longer give him money unless he got a job. The next day, Yu Xiaodong disappeared, taking their marriage certificate and Wan Nan's identity card with him. Wan Nan only discovered the missing documents that evening when her accountant called to inquire about a large transfer of funds from her account. She was shocked, as she had not authorized the transfer. However, she immediately suspected her husband's involvement. It turned out that Yu Xiaodong had transferred more than $500,000 into his own account, using the stolen documents to deceive the bank into thinking it was their joint decision to transfer their shared money. Wan Nan quickly reported the theft to the police, who tracked down Yu Xiaodong a few hours later as he attempted to withdraw some of the stolen money. Confronted by the police and his wife, Xiaodong broke down and begged for forgiveness on his knees. He confessed to losing a large sum of money through gambling, which had led to threats of death and demands to repay the debt. This was not his first brush with the law, as he had previously served an 8-year prison sentence for robbery in his home country of China. One man was consumed by shame as she learned the truth about her husband's past. Despite this, she believed that his addiction to gambling was a disease that could be overcome, and she wanted to help him recover and return to a normal life. To support him, Wan Nan agreed to pay off half of his debt and offered him a job as heater of one of her restaurants. Initially, Yu Xiaodong appeared to be grateful for the opportunity and took his new role seriously. He even developed a promising strategy for the restaurant's growth. However, his enthusiasm was short-lived. Before long, he began to spend more time playing computer games and indulging in other leisure activities. Meanwhile, Wan Nan discovered she was pregnant and shared the news with her husband. Yu Xiaodong initially expressed reservations about the pregnancy, and in a moment of hesitation, asked his wife to consider an abortion, which she flatly refused. The disagreement escalated to the point where he threatened divorce and division of their property, but eventually, his demeanor softened, and he apologized for his rash words. Yu Xiaodong later admitted that his outburst was driven by emotional anxiety, but ultimately, he was happy about the impending arrival of their child. However, things took a dramatic turn 2 months later. During a fateful trip, Yu Xiaodong suggested that his wife purchase life insurance, citing the pregnancy as a reason to safeguard her well-being and that of their unborn child in the event of any unforeseen circumstances. This seemingly caring gesture came after a period of harmony in their marriage, where he had been attentive, supportive, and diligent in his role as a husband and expectant father. Wan Nan quickly agreed to her husband's suggestion and even wondered why she hadn't thought of it herself. They purchased insurance the very next day. A couple of weeks later, Yu Xiaodong proposed a vacation to help them relax and unwind. Wang Nan was initially hesitant, but her husband was insistent. He pointed out that they had never had a honeymoon and that traveling with a baby would be difficult in the coming years. He also felt that they needed a break to clear their minds of the stress and negativity they had been experiencing. Wang Nan was eventually won over by her husband's arguments and agreed to the trip. He took charge of planning the entire vacation, choosing the destination, booking the hotel, and organizing activities that would be enjoyable and educational, yet not too strenuous for Wang Nan's pregnant state. Wang Nan was happy to leave the planning to her husband and was pleased to see how much effort he was putting into making their vacation special. On June 7th, they visited the park for the first time and spent most of the day exploring its many beautiful sights and lookouts. However, as the summer evening wore on, the park became increasingly crowded, with tourists everywhere. As the sun began to set, Wang Nan noticed that her husband, Yu Xiaodong, was growing angry and nervous. When she asked him what was wrong, he explained that the crowds were ruining their chance to enjoy a romantic sunset in peace. Despite his initial frustration, Yu Xiaodong tried to make the most of the situation, suggesting that they could still have a romantic moment as the sun set. As the park began to clear out, he climbed the fence of the observation deck and called out to his wife, Wang Nan, to join him, promising her an incredible view. However, Wang declined, citing the darkness and potential danger. Yu Xiaodong became angry but eventually returned to his wife, suggesting that they should come back to the park another time to watch the sunrise together. The Wang Nan and Yu Xiaodong returned to their hotel late on Saturday night, so they decided to sleep in and head back to the reserve early on Sunday morning. As planned, they woke up at 3 a.m. on June 9th and left for the national park while it was still dark outside. Their goal was to catch the first rays of the rising sun. When they arrived, they found the park nearly empty, with hardly any other visitors. They watched the sunrise together on an observation deck. Then, Yu Xiaodong encouraged his wife, Wang Nan, to join him at the cliff's edge to see some ancient rock paintings. Initially hesitant, Wang Nan trusted her husband's assurance that he would help her climb down and back up safely. As they took in the breathtaking view, Yu Xiaodong suddenly asked Wang Nan if she regretted anything in life. She replied that she did not. However, in a shocking turn of events, Yu Xiaodong's demeanor changed. He touched his wife's hair, kissed her cheek, whispered "die" in her ear, and then pushed her off the cliff. To avoid detection, he checked their surroundings to make sure no one had witnessed the incident. Looking down, he couldn't see where Wang Nan had fallen, and the silence indicated that there were no witnesses below. Yu Xiaodong calmly walked towards the park exit, planning to report the incident after his wife was surely dead. However, hikers who had wandered off the trail spotted Wang Nan's body on the rocks and immediately called for rescue, reporting the incident. As Yu Xiaodong was leaving the reserve, several emergency vehicles sped past him, sirens blaring. Realizing what was happening, he quickly returned to the scene, pretending to be distressed. There, he put on a convincing performance, crying and begging for help. Convinced that his wife was dead and no one would discover the truth, he remained unaware that Wang Nan's fall had been broken by tree branches, which reduced her speed before she landed on bushes and then rolled onto the rocks. This series of events cushioned the impact, saving her life and that of their child, although she suffered severe injuries. Yu Xiaodong was overcome with grief, crying and lamenting the loss of his wife and child. However, his wife suddenly regained consciousness and attempted to speak, but was unable to. The people around her noticed the genuine horror on Yu Xiaodong's face, but he quickly composed himself and leaned in close to his wife. In a hushed tone, he warned her in Chinese to remain silent if she wanted to survive. Wang Nan's injuries were severe, including head trauma, multiple fractures, lacerations, soft tissue contusions, ruptured internal organs, and massive blood loss. Her spine was also severely damaged, leaving doctors concerned that even if she survived, she would likely be paralyzed and never walk again. One man spent several days in a coma, connected to life support machines, during which time her husband remained by her side constantly. However, despite his devoted appearance, Yu Xiaodong's intentions were sinister. Every time he was alone with his wife, he thought about how to complete the job without arousing suspicion. His actions were a ruse, hiding his true intentions behind a mask of love and devotion that he examined the devices, but couldn't find a way to quietly disable them. Wan Nan slowly regained consciousness. When she did, her husband was beside himself with fear. He stayed with her constantly, terrified that she would reveal the truth to the police at any moment. When they were alone, he threatened her again, saying he had nothing to lose. During the initial police interrogation, the Wan Nan supported her husband's claim that her fall was caused by dizziness. However, when her husband briefly left the room, Wan Nan asked the nurse to call the police again and prevent her husband from re-entering. It was then that she recounted the disturbing story of her fall, alleging that her husband had attempted to kill her. Yu Xiaodong suddenly burst into the room, shouting that his wife was delusional due to her head injury and that he would never harm her or their baby. His explanation was not believable, and he was arrested on the same day. At the hospital, he was charged with multiple crimes, including attempted murder and intimidation after her husband was taken into custody and sent to jail to await trial. Wan Nan finally felt a sense of relief. Although she still had a long and difficult recovery ahead of her, she now felt safe. Wan Nan initially held on to hope that her pregnancy could be saved, despite the severe fall. However, her medical team advised her to terminate the pregnancy due to the large amounts of painkillers and antibiotics she was receiving, as well as the multiple surgeries she underwent under general anesthesia. The doctors prioritized Wan Nan's life, warning her that the fetus was unlikely to survive the strong medications. This news came as a devastating shock to Wan Nan, but she ultimately followed the doctor's advice. During the trial, Yu Xiaodong vehemently denied any wrongdoing, sticking to his claim that the incident was an accident. He remained calm and composed in prison, hiring skilled lawyers and expressing confidence that he would either be acquitted or receive a lenient sentence. In contrast, the investigators and prosecutor were convinced that Yu Xiaodong had deliberately committed the crime. Motivated by the prospect of collecting a substantial insurance payout and inheriting his wife's fortune, which was valued at nearly $2.5 million at the time. During an interrogation, Yu Xiaodong made a shocking revelation about his motive for the heinous crime. He disclosed that he was angry with his wife for not paying off his entire debt, which had accumulated due to his gambling habit. In his mind, if his wife truly loved him, she would have cleared all his debts since she had the financial means to do so. This perceived betrayal led Yu Xiaodong to believe that his wife did not love him, and therefore, he felt justified in punishing her. After making this astonishing confession, the defendant became silent, seemingly aware that he had revealed too much. He attempted to retract his statement, claiming that he had been misunderstood. Nevertheless, his unexpected admission, combined with Wan Nan's testimony, was sufficient to secure a lengthy prison sentence. In March 2021, Yu Xiaodong was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment. However, he and his lawyers filed multiple appeals, and 6 months later, the Thai court showed unusual leniency by reducing the life sentence to 10 years in prison. Wan Nan and her family were shocked and outraged by the lenient sentence given to Yu Xiaodong, believing it would set a bad precedent and encourage others to commit similar heinous crimes. Yu Xiaodong received a sentence of 10 years for attempting to murder his pregnant Wan Nan. As of now, Yu Xiaodong is serving her 10-year sentence while Wan Nan is challenging the court's decision. Meanwhile, Yu Xiaodong is filing appeals to prove her innocence. Wang Man has successfully restarted her business in 2023 and also established an organization that provides support to women who have been affected by domestic violence. She writes about her personal experiences and warnings for women on her blog.